Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, football's easy. It's easy, you know?
For some teams.
My single best football weekend ever happened Friday and Saturday. We already talked about what Indiana did to be able to clinch a national championship berth. We will have a full national championship breakdown, but yeah, it just simply won't get better than those 2 days with what the Bears did to come back against the Packers. And I am trying to be as present as humanly possible with everything that has gone on. This is the rare week in which, as excited as I am about the upcoming weekend of that Sunday to Monday stretch, I know it can all, it can all just end. And obviously for IU, it will end, win or lose. But this is the 1 week of my existence in which I just want to have time freeze from a football standpoint. And I just want to soak in as much of this as possible. And for my entire life, and I realize I'm making this really personal. We have a ton to get to, as you'll see from the timestamps on today's pod, but I have never felt this good about football teams that I have rooted for. And I just want to be as present as humanly possible right now.
You're living in the quote from The Office. It's like, I wish we knew we were in the good old days while they were happening.
Right now.
Now.
This is it. That is the second best Bears win of my lifetime. The first, sorry, Will, NFC Championship against the Saints. Getting to a Super Bowl, snow coming down. This almost topped that because of how it played out with the Bears. And when PFT tweeted afterwards, like, if you are an Indiana fan who also roots for the Bears, which there are a lot of us from the suburbs of Chicago that went to Indiana, you have to just be wondering if you're even alive at this point. I got tagged in that half a dozen times. You sent me that. Yes, I am wondering if I have died and gone to heaven, at least football heaven, because this is just the best. This is great. You guys should have told me about football happiness a long time ago, and I would have understood it.
You're like, dang, I thought this sport was just suffering and deadlines. This is why you'll be reading my stuff. Okay, this is crazy.
I get it.
Yeah, man. I mean, it comes down to, expectation is the thief of joy. We always talk about that, right? And the cool thing about where your teams are at right now is that when you have the record that you guys had as far as the Bears against the Packers, and you beat the Packers in a playoff game.
Wait, real quick, is it expectation is the thief of joy or comparison is the thief of joy?
It could be both, but in this case, the comparison creates expectation.
Okay,
right?
I like that.
And so, if you expect to lose to the Packers and you beat them, if you are used to this team, just we always talk about like what's her name picking up the football and Charlie Brown, and it's like we're so close. Well, if you beat the Packers in the playoffs, there's playoffs and there's a playoff we're going to be talking about today. If you beat the Packers in the playoffs, you've already won your season. The Bears didn't have Super Bowl expectations going into this year, right? And same thing with Indiana, making the national championship game exceeded your expectations. And so you're in kind of this beautiful pocket right now where pretty much every team that has won a championship or a Super Bowl has had Super Bowl or championship expectations, because you got to do so much in football to be a good team, from the line play to the quarterback to every group of guys has to be so locked in. It can't just kind of randomly happen. And so that's the cool thing, is that, it's not as high stakes at this point. You can kind of just sit back and enjoy it.
Football's the best. I just love it. Contrary to what Pat McAfee said about all journalists hating the thing that they cover, I love football. And we're going to talk a lot of football today. We have a ton to get to. Great pod coming up. We are previewing, by the way, the national championship. But I also wanted to do some transfer portal superlatives because we're nearly finished with this loan window. We're recording this on the 15th. The window closes on the 16th. And I know I said last pod, it's going to be a while before we get to this portal stuff because I want to be able to preview the championship. But then I thought, you know what? It's going to be too long with the way that the schedule works out. And I wanted to be able to dig into all of this because so much has happened in the portal. And we also have Bear Fallica coming on to be able to provide some more Miami context. And then we're going to close with Lad of the Week. But let's start with the national championship preview, Will. How about it? Indiana, 8.5-point favorites against Miami. The over-under I have is 2.5 Fernando Mendoza in completions. Yep, that's what he's averaged in the playoffs so far. Dave Revson had the tweet that a lot of people stole, that he has now had 5 games this season in which he has had more touchdown passes than incompletions. And that is not only is that just the most of any quarterback this century, but no other quarterback at the college levels had more than 2 such games. Pretty insane when you think about it from that standpoint. Just the 2 incompletions against Bama, 3 against Oregon. I have decided that if a team has as many incompletions as turnovers forced, that team is my automatic winner. Maybe there have been examples of this. I probably have to go way back before.
I bet that used to be super common.
Yeah, like probably. Okay, let's talk post-merger, post-integration football. Maybe you could find some of those wishbone Oklahoma teams that had that or something like that where they lost. But let's just say 21st century. 21st century automatic win. That's fair, I think. I am going to declare that if IU repeats that formula, which was the formula against Oregon, if they repeat that formula against Miami, IU wins a national championship. Bold take. Let's start with it. I will also say that Miami probably going to want to get more than 1 sack in this one. 17 pressures against Ole Miss, just the 1 sack. Mendoza did take 3 sacks against both Ohio State and Bama, so it's not as if he's only played with clean pockets and whatnot, but much like Chambliss, he's got this toughness and he is urgent without being antsy. An underrated characteristic of a quarterback at this level. He's not leaving clean pockets unless he sees, oh, I've got man coverage and this defense has kind of forgotten about me and I can go move the chains. He does that a lot. 2 to 3 scrambles per game with him. He can usually make a team pay when he does that. I'm going to make another bold declaration, Will. If Miami drops 4 interceptions like it did against Ole Miss, and it might have been even more on that one play in which it pinballed off like 3 guys and nobody wanted to catch the football for Miami, if that happens again, it will not win this game. Bold? Too bold?
I don't think there have been as many potential or turnover worthy plays from Mendoza this season as happened in that game. And so, yeah, I think that you're exactly right. I think it's about capitalizing on the opportunity, which Indiana has been so good at. And if you're Miami, they said that after the last game. They didn't play their style of game, right?
They did not. They absolutely did not. Ruben Bain said as much. And I kind of think in this one, with at least based on who IU has been, you might only get 2 to 3 of those turnover opportunities from Miami. And I'm saying that a little bit liberally in that I think even some of those 50-50 balls where they feel like their guy can go up and get it, that might be one of those 2 or 3 opportunities. And for Indiana, those in the past have been more times than not Elijah Surratt, back shoulder fade, and he's going to go up and make a play. And it's really not a 50-50 battle. But tip pass, strip sack of Mendoza fumbling on a scramble, and somebody other than Pat Coogan scooping it up. Those are the types of instances that Miami obviously has to be able to capitalize in this one. You can't let those chances slip away.
Connor, what would you say has been the game this season for Indiana where they've faced the most chaos and been kind of the most off script?
Probably Penn State or Iowa. I mean, I realized the pick 6 against Oregon in the first matchup would be considered chaos and very uncharacteristic, but with how well IU's defense played in that game, I don't think that game didn't feel like IU was losing it or like it was going to be debated down the end. So I'd probably have to go with those road games at Iowa or at Penn State.
That definitely makes sense. I think that's kind of something that is, you're not a ball knower if you think this way. It's a casual opinion, which is that Indiana kind of hasn't been tested or things, the road has been easy. It's it hasn't been easy. They just make it look easy.
Yeah, there's a huge difference. It's a good point because I criticized Ohio State for being the team that we just didn't really know going into the playoff or really going into the conference championship, I should say, what it's going to look like in those close moments. And I think there's so much value in that. And it's why a lot of people look at this IU team despite the margin of victory and feel like this team is kind of invincible because they've even shown up in those big time moments as well. And it's really good DNA for your team to be able to have. If IU, I think, comes out and just gashes Miami in the ground game with Hemby and Black, I think that's bad news bears for the Canes. I think that is a really, really tough development early on. And I'm not saying that you should live bet IU to cover whatever sort of spreads in front of them, but that's going to be an indicator of how this game is going to go, because then you're limiting, I think, what this Miami defensive line does best, which is harass quarterbacks, dial up those pressures with the DC Corey Heatherman, who has just had a whale of a season overhauling that Miami defense coming over from Minnesota. And ironically enough, he was Cignetti's first defensive coordinator at James Madison. And it's kind of a wild thing to process. Like Bryant Haynes, who is now Indiana's DC, obviously, he was the internal promotion as James Madison's defensive coordinator after Heatherman left. So as recently as 2021, not that long ago, we were doing this show in 2021, you and I together. As recently as 2021, Curt Cignetti was coaching what was then an FCS James Madison team, and the top two defensive assistants on his staff were Haynes and Heatherman, both of whom are now Broyles Award finalists who are leading 2 national championship defenses. That's crazy. I know that's of all the different angles to talk about in this game, with like Mendoza's dad being high school teammates with Mario Cristobal and, this meteoric rise of Cignetti, all those different things. That in itself, those 2 defensive coordinators in this game is wild. And you just don't really see that happen, at least not on this stage.
Connor, if he started with Cignetti at James Madison, does that make him a founding father?
I think it does. He's a founding father of Indiana football. That's for darn sure, man. That's for darn sure.
Certainly I'll say though, man, that comes back to, there are these cliches or whatever, but it really just comes down to hiring. There's one thing to trust your guys. There's one, we've seen, coaches bring in their friends or bring in a coordinator that may have been good at one point and stuck by them. But football is an aggregate game. Yeah, we see these little weird bounces and stuff like that. But over the course of a game, over the course of a season, even over the course of a drive, you start to see the good decisions versus the bad decisions. And these, and it's, we're not going to call Indiana a dynasty, obviously. They haven't won technically anything yet. But if you look at the process, I think they have the best process. And Georgia, I'd say, would be right there kind of before this playoff. We talked about that. But, the best – when you're not depending on these random chances, when you're not depending on, one big play – it's almost like, duh, you look back at the old Saban staffs where everybody becomes a head coach. And I think it's how we're going to be talking about some of these Indiana staffs. I mean, look at their OC.
Yeah. I mean, even Mike Shanahan, surprising that I don't think he's related to any of the Shanahans though. I think he's a separate Shanahan, if that makes sense.
His own Shanahan. Yes.
I think I'm pretty sure he's his own Shanahan. I could be wrong on that. But so you look at all the overlap there and you kind of wonder, what's that chess match going to look like in this one? And I think it's going to be so critical early on. What does this Miami defense figure out? What's interesting is that in addition to Miami being a little bit banged up in the secondary, remember that Xavier Lucas, the former Wisconsin transfer who was part of that lawsuit of Wisconsin wanting to keep him locked into his NIL deal. Miami basically just came in and stole him. He got the targeting call against Ole Miss, so he is missing the first half of this one. Does that mean IU comes out throwing early and they're all of a sudden testing that Miami secondary? Will they be willing to trust that IU offensive line, which has been a huge strength this year? Are they going to trust that unit to be able to hold up in pass protection and hold up for Mendoza to be on time attacking what could be a vulnerable secondary? Because I think Miami wants to get back to what worked in those first 2 playoff games of being able to not only dial up pressure, but get home and get to the quarterback, keep the offense off schedule. If you're Miami, what do you hope Indiana's offense does? That's the question that I have, because those issues are potentially there on the back end. Are you going to be content if IU runs the ball and they're not necessarily willing to attack your secondary with Lucas being out for the first half? Maybe, but IU's averaged 218 rushing yards per game this year. Ideally for Miami, you'd probably want IU to want to throw the ball and think it has more time and protection than it actually has. That's probably your ideal scenario. And it's, next man up, all those different things. But I've been trying to think about that as much as possible. Like, what plays into Miami's hand the most in terms of that opening script, which I think is going to be really important. I'd be surprised if Cignetti and Shanahan have that approach, knowing what Miami does best with Bain and Mesidor. And it's almost like the team in basketball who you just don't want to see them get the dunks. When it was Phi Slamma Jamma, the whole NC State strategy was we can't let them get dunks. That's a really dated reference, I realize. Great 30 for 30. But there are certain teams that if you let them get those dunks, all of a sudden it just changes their entire philosophy, and they're at a different level, and it almost puts them in their element.
Well,
With
Connor, I would
IU,
say
you
it's
take
not
them out
that
of
dated
that.
of a reference because most of this Indiana roster was alive for Phi Slama Jama.
That's come on. We're gonna go there. We're gonna go. That was 1980. I was negative 10 years old
Yep.
for that. So yeah, look, it's going to be interesting to see how these two units come out, with that being the IU offense and the Miami defense, which we expect to be the strengths of this game, although the Indiana defense, you could argue, is the best defense in college football. But that's probably the best scenario, at least in terms of getting the pass rush going and getting those sacks. That's probably the best scenario for Miami to be able to dominate time of possession and make this a 60-minute game wherein they can run 70 plus plays like they have 6 times this year. And everybody was keeping track of those in the Ole Miss game of, oh my God, this is the 88th play that they're running in this game. That is so much easier said than done against IU. You're getting 70 plays off against IU. That is a whale of a feat. The Purdue game was the only time this year in which IU's defense allowed an opposing offense to run 70 plus plays, and Purdue didn't score a touchdown. So make of that what you will. Miami's 5th in the country in time possession. IU's right behind them, 6th in the country in that area. Both of these teams can lean on you, and they can play with a lead. And that's going to be the thing that both of these coaches would love to be able to get early on and stick with their style. Will, this is something we've talked about a lot, but we got to bring it up again, especially as he's coming off of what was easily the best moment of his career, his very polarizing career it's become. Miami will only get a lead if Carson Beck plays smart, mistake-free football. But have you ever heard anybody say that before? First time, right?
It's so crazy, man. It's like he is true. I don't know if he's in therapy or what's going on, but that's my stat that I have, big, bold circle here is time of possession. Because like you said, number 5 versus number 6. And, we've seen Indiana lean on you, but we've seen, the weird game with Miami where Ole Miss was able to stay in the game with this tiny little time of possession. I hate to simplify it down to that, but I don't see either of these teams, making the level of mistakes or having some crazy thing where they do what Ole Miss did and hit shot plays and convert all their field goals. I mean, it would be a big shocker for me for a team to win this game without winning time of possession. And then that goes to, the 2 quarterbacks, right? We hit on, okay, Mendoza, he really has been tested, even if people want to say, oh, they have this great team, they're on this great run. One of my favorite quotes is the Jay-Z thing, I'm not a businessman, I'm a business, man. It's like Mendoza is not a system quarterback. He is the system. And so I think that it's become that at this point. That's why he's getting the draft buzz, because we've seen him down to his, second, third read. We've seen him against these 5-star competitions. And with Beck, I mean, he was the guy who was heralded, obviously, coming out of high school, coming out of Jacksonville, going into Georgia, and kind of trust his talent a little bit too much. And we haven't seen the grenade game since Louisville. We haven't really seen like a head scratcher. We've seen him miss some guys, but we haven't seen the arrogant Carson Beck that got him in trouble. And so on paper, you would think that this feels a little bit obvious as far as Mendoza is legendary at taking care of the football and making the right decision. Big, firm handshake guy. Mendoza's the type of guy you want to meet your parents or whatever. You take him home if you're a girl. Like with Carson Beck, he's got, he's had all the past and stuff. He's had the relationships and the Ferraris. But it feels like he is growing up. But I feel like in this moment, it's have you learned or is this in your DNA?
It is interesting in that it's kind of role reversal, and that you would look at these guys and think that Carson Beck is the one that's going to be out here as like the gunslinger and he's going to be all over the place, and Mendoza's more buttoned up and his style would be more conservative. But, there is still a clear emphasis with being able to make those smart plays, those smart reads in this passing offense that Miami is operated out of. And that downfield shot that Beck hit in the Ole Miss game to Marion, it was the byproduct of him extending that play. He keeps his eyes downfield, and they're able to capitalize on what's a bust in coverage on the back end for Ole Miss. And he was still only 1 for 7 on those throws of 20 plus yards past the line of scrimmage. But that play was obviously huge, and you had to be able to hit on that play, and it was a pivotal play in the game. That is the first and only pass on 20 yards downfield that Carson Beck has hit in the playoff. He's 1 for 11 on those throws. He is 6 for 16 for 93 yards when under pressure in the playoff. Only 16 pass attempts when under pressure. That is pretty darn good. He might be able to extend plays, but go ask the likes of Dante Moore, Ty Simpson, Julian Sayin. about what that experience is like against IU's front and how relentless they are. Dante Moore got pressured 18 times against IU. He got pressured 20 times in the first matchup. He didn't have more than 10 pressure dropbacks in any other game. 1/3 of Dante Moore's pressured dropbacks this year, a year in which he played 15 games, 1/3 of those came against IU. They get after you in ways that other teams don't. It's as simple as that. Carson Beck needs to play a perfect game. Shannon Dawson needs to call a perfect game. And that was a huge, huge point of contention in that Ole Miss game. It's really been kind of a point of contention during the majority of the playoff. Maybe less so probably against Ohio State, but definitely was a point of contention against A&M up until that final drive in which Fletcher was able to get going, or at least get the workload that it seemed like he was, just begging for. If this is another game in which people are picking those two things apart, IU wins by 3 touchdowns.
Wait, what are those two things again?
Those two things: Carson Beck playing a perfect game, Shannon Dawson calling a perfect game.
Gotcha.
If those two things are like, that's not there, IU's off to the races. So what do I think happens in this one, Will?
And really quick, what I wanted to jump on that's why I wanted to get you to clarify is what's so interesting. You talk about the 20+ yard plays for Carson Beck. It really is that I feel like he's not taking them. It's not that he's executing on them. And I think that shows a massive degree of poise, right? But what's so interesting about Mendoza is, like, we talked about this for the Ohio State game. When he sees single coverage, he's taking the shot. Because
the timing is perfect with these guys. Like,
yes.
It's almost not even fair to call it single coverage. It's man coverage, but it's my man is going to execute this route better than your man will. And I know exactly where I need to be able to put that football. And that's why the incompletion numbers are what they are.
And you see Randy Moss just materializing out of thin air going, "You got Moss." And I mean, with Becker, right? He's been like the hero of the postseason. But this is a guy that, wasn't like some dynamic player. He's 3rd in receiving during the regular season. But I think that just kind of goes to show finding the matchups and just being able to kind of teleport the ball where it goes. So that's the thing. Like I said, it's that Carson Beck is just reducing the opportunities. And with Mendoza, he's maximizing the opportunities so far.
Yeah, and a lot of Beck's chunk plays have come from Malachi Toney doing unbelievable things in space. Talked about the Ole Miss missed tackles. They had 17 missed tackles in that game. And Malachi Toney, I think he had 4 on the one play where he extends. He's able to pick up the 3rd down, and they're able to get a touchdown instead of a field goal, which ends up being really, really important. And Indiana doesn't miss tackles.
Yeah, Chris McNady is somewhere looking, going, "Please run a tunnel screen. Please run a tunnel screen against Indiana. We will pick you up off the ground and hug you, smiling and laughing."
So that's in the back of my mind, is like, how many times could this be an instance in which Shannon Dawson, obviously you have to test that out. That's such a huge strength of your offense, knowing what Malachi Toney does in space. And you have to trust that those opportunities, you at least need to force IU to show that it can handle that. But then if you run that 2 times and it goes for a negative play, which is something that could definitely happen with how disciplined IU has been, do you just get away from that altogether? And all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, it's been a half hour and we haven't mentioned Malachi Toney's name. What's up? Why? That's the danger.
That's the thing. I think it is going to be a real – I love that you're hitting on the offensive game plan, because the game plan that they won in the Ole Miss game, set it so on fire, right? Because it was capitalizing on mistakes. It was capitalizing on missed tackles, and we talked about that. And like I said, if you're IU, you're looking at that going, please rest in your laurels. Please try to replicate that game plan. And it's so rare to kind of see that, where a team wins such a big pivotal playoff game, and the other team's looking at it going, "Dude, do it again. We might just punt a quarter just to let you think we're going to miss tackles, because we're so locked in and good from what they've shown," right? They could show up and be a different team, but it's like they have to completely burn a win down and start over.
Well, I think IU wins by 3 touchdowns. Before you tell me that I'm not respecting Miami, not you, but people listening to this, and you're saying, "Hey, Connor, that's just a homer pick." If you want to look at IU's 4 games against AP top 10 teams this year, which actually excludes Bama and it includes Ohio State, IU's won those games by an average of 25 points. So I guess I'm giving Miami the benefit of the doubt by saying they're only going to lose by 21. So I'm going with IU to win this one 35-14. Am I crazy? Have I leaned in too much to this coronation before Miami has even stepped foot on the field, trying to become this, what I think would be one of the biggest underdog national champs ever, just in terms of this matchup. I'll even ignore the 10 seed aspect of this, because I've long said, like, throw away the seats. When they beat Ohio State, we're done with the seats. All right. Like that doesn't mean anything to me at this point, but there is a reason why it seems like the overwhelming public is looking at IU expecting this one last statement victory. And maybe I'm leaning too much into that, but I'm, like I said last pod, I'm done emotionally hedging with IU.
So with that kind of deficit and what we know about these two teams, are you factoring in a defensive score, or are you factoring in Miami abandoning the run kind of early?
I'm factoring in Miami being too limited offensively for how disciplined IU is defensively. And I think that leads to at least one huge turnover, maybe two. And I'm not saying that IU is up 21-0 from the jump. For all I know, this is one of those back and forth, as in like IU is either leading by a touchdown or 2 touchdowns. And when Miami scores, it's, they just get within a touchdown. But it's a game in which IU leads throughout, and maybe it's, up 21-14. And that's when that big turnover comes. IU gets a short field. They're up 2 touchdowns. Miami's trying to make things happen late. It can't. And IU ends up winning this game by 21. That maybe is closer at halftime than what that final score would indicate. But I think IU is able to control the tempo. I don't think this is a game in which IU needs to be bailed out late. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. And maybe this is, Penn State all over again or something like that. And they're needing to make those big plays and they can't get them this time. All right. Like, I'm not saying anything's a foregone conclusion, but man, I think that's the most likely scenario, is that IU beats a team that's, I think, limited with what it can do offensively. And I still don't have full confidence that Carson Beck will beat a defense this good.
I'm close to right there with you. That's why I wanted to clarify, because I'm looking at about like a 17-28 IU win, just because of the ball control, the, trying to run the football. And I think that even if, there were to be a catastrophic turnover early for Miami, I think they would still need to stick with the run game just because of that, right? Where you go, okay, well, Carson Beck, if you just throw a meatball to a defender, we can't just go back out there and let you do it again. So it's really, we're just kind of nitpicking here, or like splitting hairs, because I think it goes to game script and game flow as far as how many series there are, how many possessions there are. But
and he did that against Ohio State, by the way. So like, there are people listening to me saying, Carson Beck, can he beat an elite defense? I realize he did that against Ohio State. He also had the aid of that Keontae Scott pick 6 as well. Some of those offensive numbers, Carson Beck played well in that game, but well enough for 4 quarters. I think that's a little bit of a different story with this IU defense compared to Ohio State's.
I mean, it's a completely different situation when you are a ground and pound ball control team and you just get the lead the way that they did so quickly, right? And I know, it was the 2 touchdowns early where you go, well, now we can just do kind of whatever we want, right? Like, whereas if the inverse happens and Ohio State scores first,
it's a good point.
It's like, well, we better get down there and get something on this drive, because we can't get back to them and let them score again, or we can't, run the ball. And so I think that, Miami is the team that benefits the most from a pick 6 or something on special teams, like block kick. We saw that against A&M, where it goes, hey, if you could just get that little lead, now we're leaning on you, right? And so, and again, we've seen that against Ole Miss. They weren't the best at closing when they had that lead either. So we are talking about the Miami Hurricanes at the end of the day. Like, I don't want to discredit what they've done and anything, or discredit what they've done or anything, but at the same time, their path here has been so strange. And if they beat Indiana, it truly will be like a team of destiny, where they just show up like the Monstars and we just see something we've not seen, where physically they're pushing them around, which at this point, I joke about the grown men, but it's true to a degree, where Miami has a mix of great coaching, with the great offensive line pedigree of Mario Cristobal. And then Indiana has guys that are a little bit more unheralded, but they've been in the system, they've been building, right? And so I think that we've seen just such a gritty, physical postseason this year. A lot of great defense. Special teams has been such a big deal. It hasn't been like the high flying quarterback on quarterback. It's been a lot more about the other guys. And I think in a game like that, you kind of do have to like Indiana. So yeah, that was a long winded way of saying I fundamentally agree with you. I just think it's going to be a little bit more in phase. But again, and we just saw Ponds take out the Ducks, right? So if something like that happens early for Indiana on the other end.
You loved saying that. I just know it.
Well, it was okay. I said last podcast, it's a great betrayal. All the Ducks had counted on his ponds, and he let them down.
So did you see that he got a pond dedicated to him in Bloomington?
That's so beautiful. I love
D'Angelo. It's called D'Angelo's Pond. I saw Zach Osterman, my guy with the Indy Star, tweeting about it. I was like, that is chef's kiss.
Your ears are all welcome, because D'Angelo's Pond is just the kind of dad joke that would make me let out a laugh that would just break your car speakers and make your kids cry. That is incredible. Anyway, but yeah, that's the thing, is that if Indiana gets that turnover early, I'm sorry. I feel like Miami's cooked, because they've been able to avoid that and create that on the other end.
For the sake of all of your entertainment, let the record show I am rooting for a close national championship for your entertainment.
No, you're not. Shut up. No,
for the sake of everybody else. It's okay. I can admit that 65-7 and chicken wings in the fourth quarter is boring. I can admit that.
But you've never seen that be your team, Connor.
I know that.
I'm here to tell you right now, Oklahoma LSU was one of the most fun I've ever had in the game in 2019.
Here's what I fear. If IU wins a blowout, suddenly people are asking if IU, well, they're continuing to ask if IU is cheating because it had 47 players between 22 and 25 years old, because that has to be the only explanation as to how Indiana could possibly be doing this. Never mind the fact that no rules were actually broken. They're letting adults play. Never mind the fact that if you just looked at before Signetti IU history, you compiled, let's say, the best football team that Indiana could possibly compile at each position.
3 Randall L's.
3 Randall L's. Let him play quarterback, receiver. Cam Cameron was IU's coach during that. And I went back and looked at this yesterday, and I realized that Cam Cameron only got a job because Gus Frerotte made the Pro Bowl with the Redskins in like 95. Because it was like, what was Cam Cameron's background before he got the IU head coaching job? And he was just the Redskins quarterbacks coach. And because Gus Frerotte was a 7th round quarterback who made the Pro Bowl in 1995 or whatever it was, he got the Indiana football job, and he got to just coach Antoine Randall L., who started all 4 years and played like 3 sports and was just incredible. What were we talking about? Oh yeah.
Cam Cameron is like, if you just invented, like if you just gave me like a Gaelic swear word. Like, I even heard that day, because he's last coach. I wanted to make sure of this. He
LSU
last coached with
LSU.
Yeah. And it was the worst. I swear I could have done better than him. That was the famous 2 guys running routes. So, like, that was like you just dropped, like, some type of speaking in tongues to be randomly picking up Cam Cameron.
And that was Les Miles reinventing his personality from an offensive standpoint to be like, hey, we need to maximize this passing game. And it really ultimately wasn't.
We're having a good day, Connor. We don't need to talk about Cam Cameron.
Sorry about that. If you just compiled all, like, let Randall L. play 4 different positions, whatever, and you just looked at what IU would be able to do against a top 10 team in a given year, IU still probably loses to all those top 10 teams. And that's kind of the funny thing. We're just talking about pre-Signetti. But if IU wins and completes the first 16-0 season since 1894 Yale, which is just 12 years before the first ever forward pass was completed, at least on record. That's right, 1906, St. Louis University. Look it up. Maybe let's instead shift the conversation to whether IU is bad for college football like UConn women's basketball was for all those years with Gino. Let's just shift the conversation to that instead of they must be cheating. Could we agree on that, everybody?
You know what I was thinking about the other day? So, like, when the Warriors got good, right, there was just like this group of guys in the NBA community that just popped out of nowhere who had been covering the Warriors for a while, but because the national shows needed to talk about the Warriors, they started calling all these local guys. So a lot of guys got really famous. Danny, I forgot his name, but there were, back when I was covering, I could give you 4 or 5 games. I wonder who that's going to be for Indiana. Like, I wonder, like, if Indiana really truly does become a brand, who is going to be, you know, the mouthpiece of that? But it's going to be somebody who I've never seen before. Could be you. So you better start preparing for that, because the people who are ready to talk Indiana football at the drop of a hat is very few and far between.
Zach Osterman does a great job covering them. He's awesome. Hoosier Huddle, very, very good. Chronic Hoosier has been my favorite Indiana related follow, and I've met him, and he's kind of like an enigma because he doesn't like release his name or anything like that. And he hit us over at his house when we were student journalists and stuff, and he's like an IU legend. He's incredible.
We have like
Heather
a
Dinich.
Banksy of Indiana football. What is going on here?
Look, there's like an Illuminati sort of thing. No, Heather Dinich is, obviously in the IU mediascape covering the college football playoff. I don't think she's as out there as an IU football fan, so to speak.
They're
But
all going to get these sleeper cells are all get activated because we hear that they have like one of the largest, maybe the largest grad bases. What if we just find all these people? It's like in Star Wars where they did Execute Order 66, all the clothes like turned around. Everyone's just like, and I'm an Indiana Homer. You never knew it.
Not to get too down this road, I don't think it's going to end up being Sage Steele. Probably a little bit too much pushback on that one, but there'll be people in media that step up and want to bang the IU drum. Pat McAfee, honestly, because of his Indiana ties, has been kind of the one that's been banging the drum for Cincinnati the last couple of years. So he's probably the most likely candidate if we're being 100% honest. But I'll gladly take up that role. Whatever you let me know, I'll do great things for my university. Will, I was talking at Lauren about this. She did not care. I was saying, is this the most excited that I have been to attend a sporting event in my lifetime? Because I will be there on Monday. And I was going back and thinking, all right, I went to a Bears playoff game when I was in high school the year before. It was 2 years before they went to the Super Bowl, and Steve Smith torched them for like 200 yards in the playoffs and the divisional round. I was really excited for that. Indiana against Kentucky, Sweet 16, 2012, Georgia Dome was incredible, even though I knew IU was going to lose the rematch to Kentucky, and Kentucky went on to win a national championship, Anthony Davis. Those are certainly up there. I've had, just Cubs Cardinals games that I've been really excited to be able to go to and stuff like that. But I think this is the most in 2021. That was the first time I covered a national championship, Georgia, Bama in Indy, of course, something that we talked about a lot. I think this might be one. My university is playing in a national championship in which it is a significant favorite, and I get to drive my car and cover it and not pay the $3,000 get-in price. I think it's number one.
I'm trying to think if I have, because I obviously went to the 2019 championship game and I took that photo. That's my Twitter header. And I think it's going to stay there forever. It's just a picture of Joe Burrow in an LSU jersey, just looking at the sideline. You can like clearly see his face. I went all the way down and like made sure I got a good picture of Joe Burrow to commemorate it. But yeah, just soak it in, make sure and use up all your field access. Make sure and pretend we're in the age of social media, man. Pretend you're getting coverage and just get a bunch of dad pics and just don't smile too hard. They'll never know. But yeah, that being said, man, it's great because you have the access too. I mean, you could truly, I couldn't imagine and it's not like I would have fanned out or anything, but I could have been in the press room after that game and just say, ask them a question about that performance. So it is truly a dream come true. And like I said, when you were at the Kearney Hub and everything, this is,
God, how do you remember the name of the newspaper that I worked at? That's incredible.
Come on, man. We'd be talking about, Nebraska stand up, right? And so when you're doing all that and you devoted all these, years grinding to football, it's nice to have this moment. So definitely enjoy it, man. Get some dessert, some sprinkles on there, say hi to everybody. I'm sure you're going to see a ton of people in the media room that you probably haven't seen in a while. So
I know I've already been connecting with some of my IU people that I haven't seen in like a decade that I'm really looking forward to. So that experience is going to be great. And like, it's funny because I was thinking about all the Miami people that are going to be on the sideline and the who's who of like, oh, there's Ray Lewis, there's Michael Irvin, there's Clinton Portis, there's Willis McGahee, like all these different guys that are Miami greats. And it's so synonymous with that. And the entire time I'm just going to be looking around like, where's Schwarber? Where's Schwarber? He's the only one I really
we waited this long to talk about Schwarber. He crossed my mind, but I couldn't work into the conversation. That's the lad right there.
He was out there for the coin toss too in the Peach Bowl. So like, where's Cuban? Somebody, Schwarber. Come on. That's my goat. Anyway, so we are going to record a pod on Tuesday. I'm going to record that from the hotel in Miami before I check out. And so we will have like a post national championship pod. We always do the way too early top 10. So we'll kind of look at that now with the portal window closing. We have kind of a better idea of what rosters are going to look like. So it's weird because a lot of time we would have to sort of wait on what that would look like. I realize guys still have the opportunity to declare, and it's going to be difficult with Indiana and in Miami with some of those decisions and whatnot, but we will be able to sort through a way too early top 10 and dig into all this. Spoiler alert, I think I'm going to have Oregon at number 1. So just heads up there. Anyway, all right. Speaking of the transfer portal, I thought we'd do some SEC Transfer Portal Superlatives today, Will. We basically have, as of this recording, one more day with the portal open. I expect maybe a little bit more kind of 11th hour craziness. It closes on the 16th of January, except the teams in the national championship, or if we have any more coach movement, which who knows if there's NFL coach movement, can't rule out the possibility that there's college coach movement. So TBD on all of that. I just didn't want to wait until, I guess we would have to be waiting 2 weeks. My schedule is going to be all over the place over the course of the next week and a half or so with travel that I have coming up. So just didn't want to delay this anymore. Transfer portal superlatives in the SEC. Let's start with most boomer. Ty Simpson. That was a boomer generational thing, not an Oklahoma thing. Ty Simpson is the most boomer. Great story from Chris Lowe on 3. Ty Simpson told Chris Lowe that he was offered $4 million by Tennessee, Miami, and Ole Miss, and then Miami backed out. But when Miami lost out on the Sam Levitt sweepstakes, they apparently upped the offer to $6.5 million, and Ole Miss matched it. Ty Simpson said no to all of it. He said he didn't want to hurt relationships at Bama. Being a captain, it meant a lot to him. And a lot of people have shared thoughts on this, and they've done the side-by-side of like, hey, he'll make half as much as that $6.5 million if he's a late first-round pick. Why would he turn down that money? He's crazy. People said, should just run with it, and who cares, about the Bama relationship? Like, go get yours, blah, blah, blah. So here's the thing. I have no idea if Ty Simpson is going to end up being a first-round pick. I have no idea if he is going to end up in a situation that maximizes his skill set to become a franchise quarterback in the NFL. Not going to pretend like I know either one of those things, okay? I'm also a bit skeptical, as I've talked about a lot with the one-year starters in college. Track record isn't particularly good with them in the NFL, but 15 starts for someone who at least was in year 4 at college, son of a coach, maybe a better shot than most of those one-year guys in terms of one-year starters in college, but still, not sure. Not going to pretend that I know. But my respect for him has grown with the way that he has handled this process. And by the way, I thought this before we found out about Dante Moore returning for another school at Oregon and increasing the likelihood that Ty Simpson is the second quarterback off the board in the NFL draft this year. You could tell me he's QB5, and I would still respect this move and still love this approach that he's taken this, because he valued those relationships at Bama. He felt that he would have done them wrong if he had told Bama, hey, I'm going to the NFL, and then accepted money from the highest bidder to stay in college football. It's kind of similar to the Quinn Ewers situation, but it's different in one key area, because Simpson could have turned back to Bama and still been the starter, I think, over Keelan Russell and Austin Mack. Maybe that's a controversial opinion. People are like, oh, he was benched in the Rose Bowl. He got hurt. He cracked a rib. Whereas Ewers wouldn't have started over Arch Manning if he had come back for the 2025 season. So it's different there. But for those saying, well, then if he was so loyal to Bama, why didn't he just come back to Bama? Well, he didn't want to declare and then have all these teams drive the price up and then turn around and ask Bama to match, or be like, oh, I'll just take $3 million. No, he wanted to go to the NFL. He thought he was ready for the NFL. That's maybe like an extra couple mil that would have, if he had gone back to Bama and said match, that money could have perhaps taken away from the rest of the roster. It's also late in the portal cycle, so who knows how those funds are going. I think there are questions about Bama's NIL and how all of that looks right now. But they've also had a couple of weeks to be able to move on. And as Cole Kubelik has talked about, there is so much overlooked value in staying at one school and doing right by those people and those behind the scenes people as well. Ty Simpson will be taken care of well after his playing days are over. Okay. The state of Alabama will make sure that Ty Simpson is not looking for work.
AJ Get ready to learn car dealership, son.
I don't think that will be his path. If I had to guess, given his background, where he came from, his dad coaching, who knows, those opportunities, those doors could be open for him as well. But like, AJ McCarron and Greg McElroy are guys that returned to the state of Alabama, like after their football careers were over. They've been able to live in the state of Alabama, albeit with different businesses. I'm not going to get into the sushi business and whatnot with AJ McCarron. He's done media stuff as well. Everybody knows, friend of the show, Greg McElroy, has done media stuff as well. And he's been able to parlay that into a successful career at ESPN, in addition to being able to do his local show. But there is value and knowing that you literally etched your name in Denny Chimes and you didn't want anything to ruin that. Okay. So many of these former players, I talk about this all the time. Look at where former football players die. That seems grim, but seriously, look at where they die, and the amount of them that die living in their college town is way larger than probably the average person realizes. Like, I can talk about Hester's is a good example of, hey, you played in the NFL in San Diego. Why did you want to raise a family in San Diego? Well, because he loved Baton Rouge, and he knew that when he came back to Baton Rouge, he was going to have those opportunities that were there for him. And sure enough, what did he do? He's like, hey, this is where my resources are. I got my opportunities, and boom, he's been able to run with it. And Hester's obviously done great things in my totally unbiased opinion, but there are a lot of people like that. And I'm not saying that you should just be looking at what you can do to make six figures when your football career ends, because that's not all of it, but there's just part of it, and part of it with the legacy and wanting to feel like you have a place that you can turn to. Because I just think that loyalty, we can't assume that it's going to be there in this era of the transfer portal, but we can applaud it. And I applaud Ty Simpson for this. And maybe I'm in the minority. I don't really care.
So I'm going to take kind of a different angle on this. I'm going to put on my Bama fan hat for a second. Okay.
Whoa. I didn't know you had that hat in your closet.
It's,
Is that new?
It's somewhere. Yeah.
Is it dusty?
There's a lot of denim. Anyway, so it's I'd say it like this, right? This kind of goes to my point that I always joke about with Caden Proctor, where I'm like, hey, you got in the transfer portal, you got out, everybody clapped, and your draft stock went up. I saw this stat the other day, so I had to kind of like look it up and double check it. Ty Simpson is the first Alabama quarterback since John Parker Wilson to not win the SEC.
Yep.
That is the standard. Alabama, not leaving us for Miami. Okay, so I'm not going to sit here and give him a round of applause. Like, I don't think that's awesome. I don't think it's notable. It's the expectation at the University of Alabama to finish your career at the University of Alabama if they want you, or in my Bama fan hat, if we want you. Like, I hate to say backstabbing, but not backstabbing Alabama is not some awesome thing. And again, coming from the NBA, I'm seeing more and more of these NBA style mouthpiece stories where it goes, oh man, look at him. He's being such a great young man. And it's like, dude, if this was your goal, if your goal was to win a national championship and win the SEC, and you fell short of that, don't come back to me and go, well, hey, at least I'm not going to Miami. Like, get out of here, dog, or come back. Come back. You know, that's the other part of it, is that option's on the table. Go to the NFL or come back. That's what you do if you're a quarterback. Don't go out and get all these offers to say you're awesome for not taking them.
He's not saying he's awesome. I'm saying he's awesome.
No, I know, but in terms of the PR part of it, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the stories that get written and go, okay, well, look how great Ty Simpson is. Look how much of a leader he is for not leaving this team. That's been the expectation of college football forever, you know?
Yeah, but it's a different world. It's a different world, and people want to know, why would you not entertain that? And he's looking at this, instead of having this leaked from meeting with NFL front offices, he's trying to get out ahead of this now, because I'm sure even as this portal window is closing, he's still getting people that are like, hey, why are you doing this? And I don't think he's necessarily doing this and saying, I'm leaving as a legend. I'm leaving as good as one of these guys. I'm not saying that he is the best 2 or 3 Alabama quarterbacks. Lord knows I would take multiple Alabama quarterbacks ahead of him, but there have been Alabama quarterbacks that have left without necessarily, doing all of those things. Like Bryce Young, he left when Bama was 10-2, but he was going to be the number 1 pick. Like, yes, he went to a national championship. He got to win an SEC championship. Does that mean Bryce Young left on better terms than Ty Simpson? Like,
I think so. Yeah, you play in a national championship, you win the SEC, you win the Heisman.
Better player. Yeah, like better player. But what I'm saying is, like, you say, like, you didn't complete the task at hand, and we shouldn't respect you as much for that. I can respect Ty Simpson for knowing what was available, and also knowing that there still would have been risk if he had come back. Garrett Nussmeier ruined his draft stock. His draft stock went in the toilet this year. There have been plenty of guys. Cade Klubnik. You mean to tell me that Cade Klubnik helped his draft stock this year? No way. You mean to tell me Drew Aller, albeit in an injury sense, helped his draft stock by returning? No.
If Drew Aller was healthy, he would. I think we're looking at the same graphic here. The way too early graphic that has all those guys and sellers. And that's what I was about to say. I actually had this pulled up, was sometimes coming back in the move either.
Because everybody looks at this through one window and say, well, it's now risk free to come back in this era of the portal because you can just get paid a bunch of money and there's a financial floor and everything is going to be fine. And in reality, there's still risk to that. If all of a sudden, if he turns down potential late first round money and then he comes back and maybe he makes that $6 million, but then he ends up slipping into the fourth or fifth round. And for those who say, oh, it can't happen, tell me how many people were thinking that Quinn Ewers, when he decided to come back, was going to be a 7th round pick. Now, Quinn Ewers, different situation. He ends up actually getting multiple starts as a rookie in the NFL, which is highly coveted and really rare for those guys outside of the first round. But you get what I'm saying here. There is still great risk in that. There's risk in all of these scenarios. And so I kind of like the fact that he looked at this and said, I feel like I'd be doing him dirty. I'd be doing him dirty by doing it this way. And I'm okay with that.
And I'll say too, I know we got to get out of this point, but I'll say it like this. There's a standard at Alabama. Alabama is used to guys, even before NIL, let's just be real about it, taking pay cuts or taking sacrifice roles to come to Tuscaloosa and come play for Nick Saban. That's the expectation. Alabama is like a stepping stone program. So if you're Washington State, if you're Cal, your quarterback can go leave and you can still be happy with them. If you're Alabama, I just think it's a non-starter. Even like in LSU, where it's like a couple of guys here and there, like Eli Ricks left and went to Alabama. Like LSU took that so personally. So I think that's just what it is in Tuscaloosa. I think it would be a reset moment if he left. Whereas it's just let's move on and go win a championship if he goes to the NFL.
And think about how crazy it is too in this era of the portal. If Keelan Russell wins the starting job next year, it will continue Bama's streak of not having a transfer quarterback start since Jake Coker. I think that's the case since 2015, right? I mean, 2016, Barnett gets the start, but then Hurts starts the rest of those games. Tua wasn't in trend. Yeah,
I'm looking at their list of QBs. Right? Oh my gosh, they're like the only program.
So that's valued, and that loyalty at that position is valued in that sort of way. So anyway, I know a lot of people will disagree with that take on Ty Simpson. That's perfectly fine. I think it's kind of refreshing, and I realize there's PR spins to that and all of it. Okay, most obvious fit, Cam Coleman in Texas. Well, we talked about this 2 months ago. Okay, this has been percolating for a long time. Cam Coleman could go anywhere he wanted, but Texas always made the most sense. As much as there is the obvious viewpoint from Cam Coleman of just give that guy a competent offense, give that guy someone who can throw him the football, give him an offensive play caller that actually knows what he's doing. This was also a huge need for Arch. Arch's accuracy, very inconsistent. What helps that? Contested catch guys. Last season, there were 29 SEC wide receivers who had at least 5 contested catches, and Texas didn't have one of them, okay? Who led the SEC with 13 contested catches? Cam Coleman. Texas's entire wide receiver room had 15 contested catches last year.
I love it when the stats line up with your eye test. It looked like every catch was just so uncomfortable for him. I bet he did lead the SEC in contested catches. That's why his highlights were so loud.
Yes. Also, Arch had 65 pass attempts that traveled 20 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. That was most in the SEC. Coleman tied for third in the SEC with 10 such catches, which was, again, a minor miracle considering that his QB1 did not want to attack downfield, and they had offensive line issues that prevented that. You get what I'm saying. It's an ideal fit. It is a let me help you type of fit for both parties, okay? It's going to be an excellent complement to the promising but still inconsistent kind of drop-heavy Ryan Wingo, who will line up opposite of him. I love that Texas made this move because Texas is going to have to be more explosive next year, especially in the very likely event that this defense goes through a transition year, all that talent to replace. You have Will Muschamp coming in for Pete Kwiatkowski. They added Coleman. They added NC State transfer Hollywood Smothers, who was number 4 in FBS with 6 runs of 40 yards. I know, all named team legend.
I love Hollywood
already.
Smothers. One of my boys is from North Carolina. We've been talking some Hollywood Smothers for the last couple of months. And what a lad.
We're going to more thoughts on him in a little bit here. They needed bigger home run play threats, and they needed guys that weren't as scheme dependent as Steve Sarkisian still tries to show the world. I should be both the head coach and offensive play caller. Coleman checks that box for you. It's an exciting duo. Even if Arch doesn't have this unbelievable progression in 2026, even if he's kind of the same player that he was in 2025, I still think Cam Coleman does a lot for you that's going to help that offense. Just don't do the thing of falling into the trap where you say this move makes Texas the preseason national title favorite. I've already seen some of that out there. I'm like, guys, in the same way that you overlook Texas's offensive turnover, you're kind of overlooking Texas's defensive turnover this year if you just kind of assume that. But love me some Cam Coleman at Texas. Can't wait to see that.
Yes, and I'm going to try to not repeat this take too much, but I think it is one that's kind of worth monitoring. So here's just my take on Texas football because it projects forward in the next year, right? So they start off the year and their offense is just a disaster, right? Like play calling is not good. Quarterback is not good. Weapons are not good.
Running backs banged up. Offensive line brand new. All of it just didn't work.
Yeah, they came out and ran the ball against Ohio State, which felt a little bit deceptive because then they kind of got away from that to whatever. So then I think it was a very complicated mix of things that happened from there. So I still think Steve Sarkisian is one of the premier play callers in football. We've seen him be successful in the NFL. We've seen him be successful in college. Okay. There came a point in the year where Arch Manning became a good quarterback. I don't exactly know when it happened. You could see shades of it here and there, right? Not exactly the Oklahoma game because the Kentucky game came after that. Maybe it was the Mississippi State comeback. Maybe it was right about there. Okay. But then when he started to play better, then we realized, oh, wait, if he was playing this well all year, his weapons are basura. Like they can't get open. That is what I think we started to see a little bit more of in the Georgia game, where you go, Arch is out there on an island. The play calling was not great in that game either. They were getting eaten alive. And so I think that the Texas weapons were a completely underrated part of the story. We talked about them a little bit because the shine was on Arch, the shine was on Sark. But I think that even if both of those things had been there, this is a Texas offense that we talked about. It played 3 receivers during that playoff run. They replaced all of them. And the guys they replaced them with were not good. They just didn't play well. They had a couple of guys, you talk about Wingo. They had a lot of mercurial guys. They had highlight guys.
Livingstone, who hit the portal, DeAndre Moore, who hit the portal, guys that they expected more from that did not produce in the way that they hoped.
Exactly. And so I think that Coleman is so big because now, and this is, again, my take. I think Sark is just fine as a play caller. I don't think that's your issue. I think that, Arch was hitting guys in the ankles for half the season. So I'm not going to go back and go look at like me and my guy, Max Toscano, big X's nose guy. I think he tried to jump on the trend too early and say that like Arch played well in the Florida game. That's insane. Like he did not play well in the Florida. He did not.
He made some nice plays. He did not play well for the majority of that game.
Right. Because, he had back-to-back picks and everything. So that being said, bringing all that together, a guy like Cam Coleman, who is used to being in the trenches of college football, basically playing tight end as a wide receiver position of having to box out guys because your offense is so underdeveloped. The throws are so bad. The level that Arch Manning is capable of now at this point, coming off that win against Michigan, I think is just so much better than we had to deal with whatever the quarterback situation was at Auburn. A little bit of Deuce Knight, a little bit of here, there, Ashton, right? Like whoever they had. So I think that his, ceiling or his floor is so much like the ceiling and floor do not line up between Auburn and Texas. That even if Arch Manning plays poorly, he's still better than what he had. So I think this is a massive, massive move, but not for the reasons of, okay, Texas super team, more so for the reasons of he's used to being the do-it-all wide receiver. And if Texas had one of those kind of back into the season, we might be talking about this Texas team differently.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that he just is there's a reason why everybody wanted him. Okay, like very, very clear and obvious. And you could say, he's a bit overhyped. And I think you have to understand the circumstances to understand why those numbers might speak a little bit more about Cam Coleman. And it's more of a miracle that he got there than, why isn't he a 1,000-yard receiver yet? Like there are more productive guys in the portal. Watch Cam Coleman play football. Okay. Talks least says most. That is an actual senior superlative. I remember that back in the day. For this, I mean the non-portal moves that could actually say the most about where teams are at and where they think they have to build their units around. How about just SEC running back retention as a whole? Huge storyline during these 2 weeks. The 4 leading rushers in the SEC were all sophomores who eclipsed 1,000 yards, and they all signed with their schools instead of hitting the portal. Ahmad Hardy, Keewan Lacey, Jaden Baugh, Deshaun Bishop. 4,000-yard rushers back in the SEC. That is as many as the last 3 years combined. First time since 2017 that the SEC will have that. If you want to include Jeremiah Cobb and Nate Frazier, the SEC will return 6 backs who hit 940 rushing yards. First time that has happened since 2017. First time in SEC history, that the SEC will return 2 1,500-yard rushers. That went up to 2023 when the SEC was able to have 2 1,400-yard rushers for the first time ever with Judkins and with Rocket Sanders coming back. This is one-upping that. Huge for all those reasons. Also, the fact that LSU keeps Caden Durham, keeps Harlan Berry, two guys that were kind of like, hey, are they going to seek other options? But they're able to retain two guys that we've kind of been begging to see in a different, more productive ground game. And Lord knows Kiffin and, 12 consecutive ground games that have had at least 166 rushing yards, per game in a season. Like those units have been great. Okay. And I expect them to be in much better spots than they were with Brian Kelly. That's an understatement. Okay. There's a lot of potential there. So just in terms of guys who probably could have left and gotten big money at a bunch of other places, tons and tons of key returners at running back in the SEC.
And I'd say, really quick on that, what's so shocking about this to me is that 3 of those top 4 have a new offensive play caller going into the next season. And 2 of them have new head coaches, right? So it's just Deshaun Bishop that's kind of kept the synergy together. And, if you're Ahmad Hardy after that bowl game, I'm going, hey, coach, let me get a raise. Let me get like a little bit of an update on our quarterback situation.
I'm sure Ahmad Hardy got taken care of.
Like, what's the deal? Like, okay, coach, let's have a sit. So this is the On3 website. Here are the quarterbacks. So what are we looking at here? Because I'm not doing this again. And
more thoughts on that in a bit here.
Yeah. And so just the what's it called? The for the sake of his NFL future and his knees, right? You see the hire of Chip Lindsey there is something that's a running back's dream, right? Coming over from Michigan. And so that being said, I am happy that Kawan Lacey stayed at Ole Miss. I am happy that Harlan Berry and Caden Durham stayed at LSU. I think that's really cool. I think we're talking about, oh, this guy's going to go here, this guy's going to go there. I think it's awesome that these guys get to potentially finish their careers. I was excited for it. I texted you about this. I was excited for Harlan Berry getting a Kawan Lacey level of touches at LSU. Kewan Lacey level of touches at LSU under the new running backs coach Kevin Smith. And so that being said, I'm glad that those situations stayed the same because I know Durham and I know Berry have more to show, and I know that Lacey has so much that he means to that Ole Miss fan base, and the fact that he's able to come back. He stayed in the portal. Fought the NCAA, won that. So I think it's super cool that these guys are all potentially finishing their career. Look at Jaden Ball, who had a total offensive overhaul coming back under Summerall. So I think it's a very happy story all around.
Lacey fought the NCAA?
What were they waiting on for him? Was it just a re-signature?
We're talking about Chambliss, combining Lacey and Chambliss?
I might have done that. Yeah, I know there were 2 guys that were like question marks going into the season. I think they were negotiating his contract and what his deal was coming back. It was very much up in the air if he was going to return. Maybe it was just that Kiffin made a big play on him. But I think that him having considered it coming back is a really big deal.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, Mark Fletcher could join this group, but as it stands, 4 of the 5 power conference rushers who are returning in 2026 will be in the SEC. That would also include Raleek Brown, who ran for 1,141 rushing yards at Arizona State, kind of in that Cam Scadaboo role, if you look at what he did as a pass catcher as well. But he's going to be part of this new look backfield at Texas, who was one of these schools that didn't retain its backfield. And I don't know how much of that was Texas deciding that Steve Sarkisian having his most unproductive backfield as a play caller. They needed to move on from Trey Wisner and CJ Baxter. And maybe they made that decision and said, we just need an overhaul. But whatever the case, you're getting Brown to step into that role where all of a sudden you're like, man, he could really be exciting in that offense. And it's going to be a fun new duo with Hollywood Smothers as well. This question needs to be asked. I've asked it on these airwaves before. I'll ask it again. Is it return of the back, Will? Return of the back.
Many are saying this.
I do think there's something to be said for SEC teams being willing to invest in sort of a get back to basics way at running back. The last 2 seasons, 1 returning 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC, and it was Trey Wisner, who went into that season as a third-string guy, and then injuries led to him getting that opportunity, not to take away from what he did, but he wasn't exactly as heralded as some of these other guys. Also, last 2 seasons, 1 running back at SEC Media Days. It was Montrell Johnson Jr. in 2024. That's not going to be the case this year. There'll be a lot more of those. Wouldn't be surprised if we see 5 or 6 of these running backs at SEC Media Days. They can be the face of their respective programs. And I think a lot of these teams have looked at it and gone, man, I think for all of the moving parts that come with, quarterback and play caller and whatnot, we kind of need studs at running back. And I do think that's going to be a theme going into this year. I mentioned 2017 as the last time that really the SEC has had a running back class this loaded returning. Also that year, all SEC national championship, Bama and Georgia. Just saying, both those teams loaded at running back. maybe that's part of the formula for the SEC to feel like we are going to get back to competing at a national championship level, doing it in the way that we feel like we know how.
Absolutely.
All right. The most only in 2026 development, Will. Portal flipping. New term. Kind of hate it. We got it from, at first, it was Notre Dame quarterback Kenny Minchey, who flipped from Nebraska to Kentucky. And then we got it with the NC State transfer of Hollywood Smothers going from Bama to Texas. Minchey was initially committed to Nebraska, and then a day before he's set to sign in Lincoln, he flips to Kentucky. It was kind of Bo Prabula all over again, in that Minchey's name was discussed nationally more when he was in the portal than probably any other time of his career. And everybody kind of looked at this as, oh, this backup quarterback who's hitting the portal is causing everyone to say there's something wrong with the system. The fact that you have portal flipping, it just in general is just a weird premise that we've never really had to understand. And it's kind of irrelevant for Kentucky now, but it felt like after Will Stein missed out on the Sam Leavitt sweepstakes, he basically said, there's the guy I want. I'm going to go and get him. You did also have Nebraska radio people say that he was going to have more money at Nebraska than he would have at Kentucky. So kind of make of that what you will. Minchey missed out on getting that starting job at Notre Dame. And it's really hard to evaluate who he's going to be as a quarterback if without looking at spring game reps and stuff like that. And, you know, you could say, well, the guy barely missed out to CJ Carr. You know, does that mean he's going to be great? And if you're thinking, why would that guy get a lucrative market in this day and age? Why do he have a power conference market to go start immediately and probably be paid pretty well to do so if he couldn't even win a quarterback battle with a guy that was younger than him? Once upon a time, that described Joe Burrow at Ohio State. So it's not to say he's going to become Joe Burrow. We're not doing that. But at this point, Will Stein's ability to evaluate quarterback transfers has earned him grace that the previous regime at Kentucky did not have when it decided that Zach Calzada was going to be the option in a pivotal year for Mark Stoops. So
where's your money, Garrett? Get your money, Garrett.
I refuse to watch that video. Can't do it. But portal flipping, a thing. And yeah, Hollywood Smothers flips from Bama to Texas. I initially was like, huge box check for Bama. He forced as many missed tackles, 48, as the entire Bama backfield in 2025, which is pretty insane. They needed someone that could do that because I don't really trust that scheme to be able to create big running lanes. We've now had enough of a sample size with Ryan Grubb at this level and in the NFL to say that's not really his MO. Dylan Johnson could run through a lot of contact. He kind of did that at Washington in 2023, but Ryan Grubb really hasn't found someone like that since then. They are clearly hoping that Daniel Hill can be that guy. And we know that Jam Miller, Kevin Riley, those guys are both gone. As of this recording, noon on Thursday, Bama has not added a running back in the portal. Kind of surprised that Texas was able to flip Smothers when it already had Brown on board. Maybe not as surprising considering how much Sark has relied on those two-back systems. And you have a guy in Brown who's 5'9", sub 200, so you knew that you were going to need to get someone else. It then prompted Christian Clark to enter the portal after it looked like he was really good getting those RB1 duties in the Citrus Bowl. But nonetheless, surprising in that I thought Bama had a clear and obvious need at running back. And instead, you're now going, okay, so Daniel Hill, you're going to be the guy. You're going to figure things out. I'm not crazy about that. And I think I'm back to being worried about Bama in this ground game, all because of portal flipping.
This sounds like a joke. It is not a joke. During this portal season, I have legitimately seriously considered what the prereqs are to get into law school because this is so fascinating to me. The world that we're in right now, the Wild West, just legally, where, you know, we have these commitments. So just a quick aside on that. We saw the thing with the quarterback out of Washington that had potentially
Demond Williams had
flipped LSU. And then it's like, wait, you signed a contract.
Didn't flip LSU officially, entered the
potentially.
portal.
That's the thing. He had potentially flipped LSU. And then they realized, okay, well, we're actually not paying players to play football. We're paying them for the NIL, but it's still a legally binding contract. And you have to pay all these back damages, and that wouldn't be worth the price tag. And then it's like, okay, well, just because somebody announces via graphic that a guy has re-signed, and doesn't mean that he has actually put pen to paper. And until he does that, it's not binding. And even if it is, it's this. And so that's why I got confused on Lacey earlier, because I was like, what was his situation? He was in one of those kind of hold up situations, right? And so that being said, this is such an insane place where the NCAA is totally toothless, right? And we could all roll our eyes for the last 20 plus years and go, oh, the NCAA, selective enforcement, you didn't let this tight end transfer, the family member was dying, da-da-da. But I think we can kind of agree that a toothless NCAA is kind of worse for the sport, as bad as the NCAA was. Obviously getting to some long-term governing body is the goal, and you're going to have some cracked eggs between here and there. But the concept of all of this stuff just being what you can defend. I mean, it's a PvP zone. It is like, if I could legally prove to you that I could go to your house and live in your closet for 3 days and now I own your house. It's like the most tenuous legal grounds. And then, on the Shambliss stuff, it's like, okay, Lane Kiffin and this attorney, Tom Mars, was fighting his case, but he signed a woman. It's just so weird to see guys have graphics, make commitments. And we were used to this in recruiting with guys flipping, but not so much grown dudes getting salaries announced like we see in the NFL. And then it's like, well, we were still working on the incentives, the particulars, and this team, Tennessee tried to do that with Sam Levitt at LSU.
And Damon Williams signed with Washington. And that was why this got messy, was because Washington and the Big Ten could then enforce it and say, this is a legally binding deal. This wasn't just a verbal commitment, a handshake. And that's why Damon Williams is staying at Washington and not at LSU. So they actually did have a ground to be able to stand on. And it wasn't so much the NCAA. It was actually the conference and the school who said, we can legitimately enforce this. And now if Damon Williams wanted to find his way out of that deal and then try and walk on at LSU, then there would have been this buyout that they would have had to pay. And so the document actually did end up saving it. But to your point, nothing is real until a document's signed. And a verbal commitment in this day and age in the portal, I'm having to check myself on this too, because like when Sam Levitt is committing to LSU and it's still not signed, and Tennessee at the 11th hour is trying to swoop in, I'm like sitting here writing a column about it, and the fit at LSU and the comp to Matt Corral and Jackson Dart and Chambliss, and how are they similar in this way and different in that way. And I'm saying to myself, well, if Tennessee swoops in here because he hasn't signed yet and we get another portal flip, then I'm going to be left to kind of pick up the pieces and figure out what it's going to look like here. And it's just going to turn into, this whole thing is messy in every sort of way. And collective bargaining is the only thing that's going to prevent it from being messy, but it doesn't feel like that's as imminent. So this is just the messy world that we have been asked to exist in during these 2 weeks, wherein portal flipping is now a thing.
And I know we're running long here, but I do want to say this. What the case that we need to have, in my opinion, that would break this open? Because again, I've said it time and time again, coaches want to have their cake and eat it too, right? Like they want to not have a players union, but they want to have enforceable contracts. So it gets down to a lot.
Everything exists because of coaches, by the way. Just remember that.
Oh, yes. And then they play victim like, oh my God, the sport is so messed up. The calendar is so messed up. It's like, well, truly, if you guys had your way, and, in concert with the NCAA, the players wouldn't be getting played. The transfer portal wouldn't be this way. So it's hard for me to take that seriously. So what I think is going to be the interesting case is if you have a guy like, I'm just making this up. This obviously didn't happen. But let's say if just like Hubbard out of Oklahoma State, going into his final year, let's say like Ohio State was like, hey, dude, I don't care what your NIL contract says. We're going to pay the fine. We're going to do it. If it's $10 million, if it's $4 million, like whatever the university was committing to wouldn't line up with what the new university was willing to pay and then some, or you just go, I'm writing a blank check. I want this guy on my roster. Because that's what LSU balked at, from what I understand, is essentially the price tag. It was that he could have, to your point, opted out, walked on, done all this different stuff to get around it. So because from what I understand, again, haven't enrolled in law school, but the contracts are not pay for play because coaches don't want that. They're NIL rights grant deals.
Correct.
And so what if a guy has done these, I'm coming back home, and the new school goes, I don't care. It will pay you $5 and we'll pay a total of $9 to get you here. And I think that's what's going to break the sport. And I think that LSU and Lane Kiffin creeped up to that, of just completely breaking the system and really getting a solution. And at the 11th hour, they went, this guy isn't worth $3 million.
It's so much money. It's so much money. You're basically doubling what's already an insane contract to pay for 1 year. And there's still some baked in risk with that. So that's probably why we didn't see LSU test that. But It felt like a huge pivotal moment with the future of the portal. And in some ways, Damon Williams just staying at Washington kind of kept the status quo, so to speak. But yeah, there's a lot that still needs to be figured out with all this, and just with portal flipping in general, and all the different semantics and lawyer talk and everything that's associated with that. Okay, most important defensive addition: Tennessee adding Chaz Coleman from Penn State. Huge get for Jim Knowles, the new Tennessee defensive coordinator, who obviously was at Penn State last year and was at Ohio State before that. A lot of people have talked about year one of the Knowles defense kind of taking time. And if you look at history and his background, there can be some tough moments for you year one in that scheme, but you can work through that in this day and age if you bring guys over who already know the scheme. Chaz Coleman definitely does that. As a true freshman, 15 pressures, 10 hurries, 4 quarterback hits. That's on only 70 pass rush snaps. He looked really, really good in a limited sample size. This is somebody that everybody looked at and wanted. He is the highest rated defensive player in the portal. Take that for what it is. But with defensive players in the portal, usually there's a little bit more accuracy with predicting that, at least at the top. He's even higher rated than someone like Damon Wilson II, who left Mizzou for the portal. He still, as of this recording, is undecided on his next destination, but he had an all-SEC season, kind of confirmed the 5-star billing that he came in with. And last year, Wilson, leaving Georgia for Mizzou, he was the highest rated defensive player in the portal. I'd say that worked out. The year before that, the highest rated defensive player in the portal, Caleb Downs, worked out. Before that, Travis Hunter, worked out pretty well. There's a lot to be said for these rankings. Again, they are far from perfect, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Like I was looking at it yesterday, Luke Kromenhoek, who ended up being the third-string quarterback at Mississippi State, had the same exact ranking as a transfer as Fernando Mendoza, which is just wild. So take that for what it is. But defensively, the market usually doesn't whiff at the top with those top-end defensive guys. A ton of defensive reinforcements on the way for Tennessee. They needed it. A lot of them in the secondary, which that unit is undergoing a significant overhaul. We knew that was going to be the case. That unit just has to be better in what figures to be a very pivotal season for Josh Heupel.
It's going to be interesting to see. I love how you kind of hit on this Jim Knowles curve thing, because like the way that his defense is laid out is it's like a thinking man's defense, right? It's a little bit similar to some of the Aranda systems, not in terms of the base and the personnel they play, but in terms of the freedom that guys have. And I think that's like, you have to, it's underrated, because we've seen him at the end of these things have these elite players who have been in the film rooms for years. But if you're coming off of a bad defense like Tennessee had last year, right? And it's weird because some of the defensive guys had been through good defenses under the same DC, but having to unlearn all those rules, because the whole defense is essentially based on like rules, right? And so I could see that, and like Tennessee fans, famously like to take time with things. It's going to take a couple of years just because you have this big name guy. You could look at some of these bigger name defensive coordinators that have been hired recently. A lot of them were the more like blitz happy guys, and those guys could pay off a lot earlier because they're used to getting after the quarterback and creating chaos. And when chaos is happening in a 19-year-old mind, they could do anything. They get a tattoo, they could break up with their girl, they could do whatever they need to do, whatever is in their mind at the time. Whereas the 4-2-5 or the Jim Knowles defense is more of a we are going to be so solid. We're not going to do all these like gimmicky things. We are just going to, over the course of a game, over the course of a season, beat you through war of attrition. So again, just be aware of that. I think Tennessee did go with a little bit of a quick fix with a long-term hire.
And you need talent to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You need talent year one, because it's not always going to be dialing up those exact right pressures and whatnot. That's a really good point. And I think it's why Chaz Coleman is a huge, huge get for that Tennessee defense. Most impressive transfer portal haul. In a vacuum, if we're just talking about the best SEC portal class, probably Texas or LSU, like probably one of those. Kiffin is the portal king. We knew there would be high likelihood of Sam Leavitt. Also, you're able to get talented receivers like a Trey Wilson, who obviously I love, picked him to be the comeback player of the year, and it just did not necessarily work out this past season in Florida, but I'm excited to see what he can do at LSU. Jace Brown coming over. Lane is a default answer to that question. And the bar is obviously so high for all of his portal classes, especially now at LSU, that it's darn near impossible for Kiffin to have the title of most impressive transfer portal haul. Will, before I get to who I really think had the most impressive SEC transfer portal haul, relative to expectations, at least that's how I'm viewing that. How fired up were you about what Kiffin was able to do with his first portal class?
It's so crazy, man, because I find myself to be often very grounded, and in reality, like you kind of know this about me. It's kind of the joke about me as a fan is that among LSU fans, I'm usually more towards the middle and not like up and down. And when all this stuff happened with Jeff Landry, I was just like, we're going to end up hiring, Farmer Fran from Waterboy. Like, I don't know what's going to happen here. And then it's, Lane's going to get in and he's going to cook in the portal. And in my mind, I'm going, well, he has all this bad PR and like all this stuff is going on. He is cooking in the portal. And I want to hit on one thing that I just is completely blowing my mind. And I'm curious to see your thoughts on this, right? I think that it's so interesting this is happening at LSU, the place where Brian Kelly famously had the same agent as Garrett Nussmeier. Right now, Garrett Nussmeier was hurt last season, and for whatever reason, Brian Kelly stuck by him after having Michael Van Buren, who he brought in as a former SEC starter at Mississippi State, in the event of injury. Well, that injury happened, and you didn't break glass in case of emergency. You had a neutered offense, a lame duck quarterback for financial reasons, for whatever reason. I don't know what the situation is there. But that being said, on the other side of the aisle, you have Lane Kiffin, who brought his quarterback to media days at Austin Simmons, who was singing his praises. And you could kind of talk about the injury, but let's be honest, that's not why Austin Simmons lost his job. He lost his job because he couldn't stop throwing first quarter interceptions that Lane Kiffin had to get over. So when you break the mold of college football in the way that Lane Kiffin did at Ole Miss, when you actually give a chance to start that guy, and also he previously did this with the Oklahoma State transfer that they had what was his name? Simmons.
You're talking about at Ole Miss. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name.
It was Spencer Sanders. So
yes,
he
was
another
end up playing, and he was brought in to give Jackson Dart competition after Jackson Dart had his first year as a starter, and then they also brought in Walker Howard in that class, and it was like, oh man, look, they're going all in. This is a three-way battle for the quarterback, and in reality, it felt like just Kiffin trying to motivate Jackson Dart.
And right, but again, he didn't. I think that what happened was after you see what Jackson Dart was able to do, I do think it was a pretty open competition. I don't think he necessarily lied to Spencer Sanders. I think that he said, you're going to have an opportunity to win this job. Sure. And I think that offense is so vertical and it has so many different parts to it that I think that he didn't have the pedigree and the arm strength to run the offense. I say that to say, when you break the mold the way that Lane Kiffin does, you essentially create two quarterback recruiting slots, right? Because most coaches are going to stick with their guy. It takes a lot of, we've seen, Saban do it famously. We've seen Kirby do it. But the way that Kiffin did it, the type of guy, going off of your 5-star for a different 5-star. And I think that the Stetson Bennett thing is a version of this. Like that took a lot of guts, right? But going to the D2 guy at Ferris State, when your team is still humming, creates two things. It creates a spot for a Sam Levitt, who is obviously injured, and then it creates a spot for the guy under him who can legitimately say, I could compete for this spot and win. And it's almost like unlimited PTO. Stick with me for a second. It's almost like unlimited PTO in a way where you use people's sensibilities against them. When companies go to unlimited PTO, everybody takes less PTO in the aggregate, right? If you tell a guy, hey, you could come in and win, every quarterback is going to bet on themselves. They're going to believe they could be the next Trinidad Chambliss. And so now you have the dude from Elon coming in.
I have more thoughts on him in a bit, Will. We'll get to more thoughts on him in a bit.
And so he comes in and thinks he can win this job, at least in spring. You have Longstreet coming in. He's like, I'm the future, but I left a backup situation to come be a backup. You got three dudes in that building who really think that they could be the starter. You don't have backups. You don't have a hierarchy. And Brian Kelly was so about this is number one, this is number two, this is number three. And I think that's how you turn around an offense is a sense of true accountability.
I think this first portal class for Lane, especially with the quarterback room, how quickly that flipped. I think that it is about what I expected it to be. I think it's meeting those expectations. And, Lord knows he had plenty of Ole Miss portal classes that I looked at and I'm like, I like that receiver, but, let's see what it looks like. And then he ends up having, 3 or 4 games in which he could just take over, and that's just kind of the way that Kiffin has always been about this. He's always been about adding depth. And so LSU, I think certainly you're looking at this class going, yep, that's about what we expected, overhaul with receiver and able to overhaul at quarterback too in these key areas. But in terms of the real most impressive, just relative to expectations in the SEC, I thought Kentucky kind of wins that. And here's what I mean. I knew Will Stein was going to attract some big time names in the portal because as much as the Oregon brand and Dan Lanning, they helped the Ducks just be able to kind of build the exact type of roster that you would want. If you're just a college football fan who's like, hey, what do I want my team to look like? Recruit top 5 classes, get huge portal additions. That's kind of the name of the game in this day and age. And Oregon has passed that with flying colors. But there was the obvious of playing in a Will Stein offense is a huge sell moving forward. What Kentucky has done in the portal has gone beyond my expectations. And I already mentioned the Minchie flip, and kind of take that for what it is. That's in the eye of the beholder. But they have totally rebuilt that big blue wall. They lost all 5 starters on that offensive line, and then they go into the portal and they get Colton Price, who was the top-ranked center from Baylor, who allowed 1 sack on 526 pass blocking snaps behind Sawyer Robertson. They get Tegra, I'm going to get the pronunciation of this right, Tegra Shabola, 2-year starter on that Ohio State offensive line. He's going to step in and play right guard for you. And then Lance Hurd, who had a huge bounce back year for Tennessee, in which, no, he wasn't perfect, but he still earned all SEC honors at season's end after he only allowed 3 sacks. I've been wondering if Will Stein to Kentucky is a bit like Ben Johnson to the Bears. Probably not as drastic with that turnaround, but one of these things where you get a guy stepping in as a first-time head coach who has this unbelievably proven track record on the offensive side of the ball. And what Ben Johnson did, that is one of the reasons why the Bears are still able to be in the NFL playoffs. They overhauled their offensive line. They recognize this is a huge area of need. If we don't address this with veterans, we're not going to be able to do anything. And this proof of concept in year 1 is going to be non-existent. And that's a huge win for Kentucky to be able to address those roster needs in that way. You know, I love me some CJ Baxter. He just needs to stay healthy. I'm curious if he can do that at Kentucky. His former Texas teammate, Elijah Barnes, comes over as one of these promising linebackers who flashed a lot of potential in that bowl game performance. He's a former top 100 recruit. He's got 4 years of eligibility. I still think they're going to need some help at receiver to be able to live up to the feed the studs mantra that Will Stein embodies. But this is someone who just turned Malik Benson, right? Malik Benson, who went to 2 different power conference programs as this guy who had a lot of success at the JUCO level. He went to Bama, he went to Florida State. And when he goes to Oregon, I'm like, why is Oregon taking a chance on this guy? And then all he does is end up being the leading receiver on a team that made it to the semifinals. Like, pretty remarkable what Will Stein has been able to do at the wide receiver position. And I think that they're going to be able to do that at Kentucky as well. So I think there are a lot of people that are looking at Kentucky's portal class and going, is this a quicker turnaround than initially expected? Like, is this a team that could be in year 2 fringe playoff contender? Like, I know our guy Josh Pate was tweeting about that as well. Don't assume anything with a first-time head coach. A lot of things that Will Stein will have to figure out with game management and personnel decisions, all that. But outside of like winning the Sam Levitt sweepstakes, I think if you're a Kentucky fan, you're feeling like this is why you needed to move on from Mark Stoops and the way that he approached building an offense. Will Stein brought over, and this is kind of the underrated thing. If we're talking about Kentucky being a fringe playoff contender in year 2 or something like that, the underrated thing that we will need to look back on, he brought over Pat Biondo from Oregon, who is this director of recruiting strategy for all 4 years with Dan Lanning when they're building those great rosters at Oregon. He gets to be the GM now at Kentucky. I just think that's one of those things that's really, really important. So I loved what Kentucky was able to do in the portal.
I fully align with this. I love this pick. And, the Ben Johnson comp is such a good one because you go from having the guy in Mark Stoops that, you bring in these, great receivers, you have these great running backs, and you're just sitting there kind of like the Bears were going,
with Eberflus.
How is this going to go wrong? We have this talent. How are we going to find a way to bleep this up? We got Coder Bowley. How are we going to find a way to bleep this up? And on the other side with Will Stein, it's like, hey, you could bring in Joe Sloan and I'll believe in you. Honestly, that's the biggest level of stamp of approval I can get. And you know what I love about this? And you hit on this. What has been Oregon's issue in these playoff games? Too many skill guys, not enough Bubbas, not enough big boys, getting pushed around in the trenches. Look at the 2 of the top 3 transfers ratings wise for Oregon or for Kentucky coming in. Lance Hurd, talked about Colton Price. That guy looks like has the whole Morgan Wallen discography downloaded to his Spotify. He's got like the little goatee. He looks like he says yes sir. Has a big handshake. And then there's another dude from Ohio State, right? In terms of like the linemen. So I think that it's there. He immediately looked at not what are even Kentucky's issues, but what did I see at Oregon that I want to clean up? And not, I'm this awesome guy who, let me just bring in this flash. Let me pull all my stuff and try to make it a swing at a Cam Coleman or something that maybe wouldn't even help us if we got him. Let's actually rebuild this in the image of the teams that were kind of beating me. So yeah, I'm through the roof on this sign thing.
Yeah, and Isaiah World last year coming over from Nevada, the offensive tackle who was really decorated. That was somebody that Oregon was able to get in the portal, and they've had depth issues at different points this season. It's kind of because they were able to do things in the portal that they were able to get to that point in the semifinals, but ultimately they fell short, and maybe they just ran into a buzzsaw in consecutive years. Most intriguing, it's a tie for me. Aaron Philo at Florida and Byron Brown at Auburn. Let's start with Philo, because this is someone who broke Trevor Lawrence's Georgia high school football career passing record. Pretty ridiculous, like 13,000 passing yards in his career. Very different player from Haynes King, who he backed up from the jump at Georgia Tech with Buster Faulkner running that offense, who's obviously now coming over to Florida as well. As you recall in that Miami game in 2024 with Cam Ward, that was when they basically had to run a 2-quarterback system because Haynes King was banged up, and they brought Aaron Philo in as the guy who could throw the football. And they still wanted to use Haynes King kind of as a wildcat quarterback, essentially. So he's been relied on in some key spots, although the experience is still pretty limited with him. Now he comes over with Faulkner to Florida, similar to the John Mateer, Ben Arbuckle, or Diego Pavia, Tim Beck package deal with the offensive play caller and the quarterback. Everyone expected this kind of immediately, especially after we found out that DJ Lagway wasn't going to be a fit in what they wanted to run, and not necessarily surprising considering the way that Haynes King wanted to be used, that DJ Lagway was not going to be a fit for Buster Faulkner. Aaron Philo will not be a battering ram in the same way that Haynes King was. So if you're thinking that that's going to be the type of offense that they're going to run, it's not. It's still more than probably DJ Lagway felt comfortable with, but he's going to give you that toughness as a runner. He still wants to be able to run to throw. He's going to extend plays and stay behind the line of scrimmage and try to extend that way. Probably still needs some more reps if you kind of watch what he's done so far at the collegiate level, work through some of those mechanical things. Still likes to throw off his back foot a little bit too much for my liking. It always makes me kind of cringe as someone who has, as I call it, post-traumatic Rex Grossman stress disorder. Yep, real thing. Rex, man, loved throwing off his back foot.
I think you have that. I don't think Rex has that. I think Rex he gave you that.
Rex could play pickup football tomorrow and have a clean pocket and still throw off his back foot. He still would, definitely. Hey, it worked out for him in Florida. Maybe it's going to work out for Aaron Philo as well. But really, it's going to be really fun to kind of see the offense that they're able to build around him year one with John Sumrall. So there's that. And then Byron Brown, the move everyone expected to happen, did end up happening for Alex Golesh with that year one offense that he's going to run at Auburn. The USF quarterback follows the USF coach to Auburn. As established as any Auburn quarterback since probably 2018 Jarrett Stidham. I mean, because Bo Nix, we look back on and we know his career in the way that it played out, but I wouldn't have called him as established coming off of the 2020 Chad Morris experience. Like going into 2021, I wouldn't have called him as established as what Byron Brown is. And this is what I mean by that. He is one of 13 guys, and I saw this from the next round, who tweeted out this graphic. One of 13 guys in FBS history with 3,000 passing yards and 1,000 rushing yards in a season. It's pretty darn good. You've got someone that obviously knows the Alex Golesh offense. They brought a ton of those USF skill players over for year one. That's a big part of what they're trying to do from the jump. And while I know that Auburn fans wanted to see the Deuce Knight experiment through, and there's a little bit of this FOMO with him, especially if he ends up being the starter at Ole Miss in year one, I think Brown elevates your year one floor. I do. Your team got a 3-year starting quarterback who led the nation in scrimmage yards per game, and just came from a top 5 offense in America. And if you think, oh, he's not a winner, USF didn't even get to the playoff, go back and look at what he did in those losses, like against AAC competition. He was not at fault for those losses, okay? What's intriguing is how he's going to look when things break down. He had 702 rushing yards after first contact as a runner against guys who can tackle better in space than a lot of those AAC defenses, which were not particularly good. It was known kind of as what the Big 12 was at the Group of 5 level. My question is, how is that going to look? Because he had a 52.8 adjusted completion percentage under pressure, which would have been last among qualified SEC quarterbacks. And his NFL quarterback rating in those spots was 68.5, which would have been 11th in the SEC, just behind Jackson Arnold. That's not great. Brown is a huge year one get. I love that Alex Golesh was able to make that happen. There's still, though, some wait and see with his game against SEC defenses.
So I'm really quick. I'm curious to see how that's how that is basically compiled as far as the yards after first contact, because I know that unlike the NFL in college football, like sacks are counted as rushing attempts. So I'm wondering if a lot of those first contacts would have been a sack.
I think they would have been, and he has to turn into a runner.
Exactly.
It doesn't count as yards after first contact if you break a tackle in the backfield and then you still end up throwing the football.
Exactly, but I'm making sure it wasn't after he crossed the line of scrimmage, because that is just such a mind-blowing stat to me, kind of either way, because it's one thing to get ahead of steam and kind of push some guys off of you with momentum. It's another to like create a whole run out of a negative run where the defender has momentum on you. You got to pivot and run. On both of these guys, there's a lot of similarities. Both programs lost a guy who was very highly rated in DJ Lagway and then Deuce Knight, kind of the hopium that the old coaching staff was selling to you. And so if you are the new coaching staff, you kind of, it's like you're starting at a little bit of a deficit, because a lot of why these fan bases were clinging on to these coaches was because of what these quarterbacks could potentially do. Now, that being said, I think there's a huge difference between hiring your buddies, as John Summerall famously said he was not going to do, and bringing over players from your previous school. You know why? Hiring your buddies comes with long-term commitments, buyouts, career changes. Bringing in some other players, they could just hang out. They could just go to school and be students and go on to live lives. They're not really promised anything. And so to bridge that gap with some of your former guys, don't compare those two in my mind, because you could have as many quarterbacks, as many receivers, as many whatever. I love Matt Campbell going from, taking half of Iowa to Penn State with him, right? I think that's actually kind of a good strategy, because it does, assuming they don't all get guaranteed starting roles and you don't just copy paste. But I think getting in guys who are familiar with the system could be super helpful for you. So it's probably going to be jarring for both of these schools, where you looked at some of the talent that was not being maximized, in the receiver room at Florida, in both quarterback rooms, and going, okay, well, if we could just maximize our talent, our coaches are letting us down, versus, well, we've lost a good bit of talent. These guys aren't as highly rated, but we trust our coaches to figure it out.
I understand for Auburn fans, it's a weird thing to process because you've never really built a roster this way. When Brian Harsin and Hugh Freeze came over from respective Group of Five programs, nobody followed them. Now with Harsin, it was at a time in which we weren't sure if automatic eligibility was going to happen for undergrads yet. They were still sorting through that when he was hired. So it's a little bit more understandable. With Freeze, we kind of wondered, is Caden Salter going to come over from Liberty? That doesn't end up happening. And it's a totally different way to build a roster. And I'm not saying that this is the model, and I'm not just going to be the guy that's going to compare this to everything, okay? Curt Cignetti, when he brought over all those James Madison players to Indiana, 13 in year one, it ends up being a huge part of the year one foundation. They had 4 of those guys who were James Madison players that transferred to Indiana, who were all Big Ten guys in year one. And it was kind of the proof of concept of this is how we're going to operate. And it's not just so much you want people in that room to listen to you and to feel like they have your back, but this is how we run things and this is how we're going to do things. And I think Auburn needs that. Honestly, like I do. And I think they've been, they've obviously been really, really active. And it's mostly on the offensive side of the ball with bringing those USF players over. They also brought Bryson Washington, the former 1,000-yard back from Baylor, over as well. So he's going to join that backfield with Jeremiah Cobb. And I think that Auburn fans, it's two separate things. It's tough to see Deuce Knight and Cam Coleman walk out the door. Totally get it. Cole Kubelik had a great rant about it. Like if you're thinking that that's like the end all be all and you're in a worse place, I think you're ignoring the obvious and you're probably making too big of a deal of that. You have to look at what's coming in more so as well and understand that there is long-term benefits to being able to have this proof of concept in year one, what Alex Golesh is trying to do. So a lot of things that you're having to get used to if you're an Auburn fan that's different than, hey, we're going to recruit at the high school level. We're going to get top 5, top 10 classes. When you're coming out 5 consecutive losing seasons for the first time since the Harry Truman administration, you got to do things differently. And they're doing that. And also listening to what worked on the defensive side of the ball by keeping DJ Durkin and keeping some of those key pieces there. So that's a lot of thoughts on Auburn. We still have a lot to get to here. So I want to
really quick, let me say something, guys. As a team that has lost their head coach, I don't know if there's in the portal era been a coach who is like or a team who has lost their coach and had more incoming than outgoing transfers, just because even the starters are trying to figure out their next move, but certainly the backups are like, why would I continue to be a backup for a new administration? Here's a little tool to keep you sane. Use 24/7. Don't use on 3. On 3 will factor in guys that are leaving versus guys that are coming in. You're going to lose more guys than you're going to get. Look at the guys that you have coming in and just say, hey, we lost a bunch of backups, so we might have lost 30 guys. You may have lost 25 guys, but these 15 that we're getting in are actually going to play and make a difference. And you're never going to win the cumulative rankings because of the numbers that you lose when you lose a head coach. And a guy got fired for a reason.
Bama lost Julian Sand and Caleb Downs when Nick Saban retired. You're good when you have a coaching change. and you have talent, you're going to lose some of those guys.
A famously very close locker room that had the best play we've ever seen still lost those guys. That's a really good point.
Yeah. All right. Most buy low guy. I told you we were going to get to him. Landon Clark, the new LSU quarterback from Elon. Elon? That's how we say it. It's the same, right? I think. That's how I've always pronounced it. I should know that. I am not saying that Landon Clark is the next Trinidad Chambliss, but everyone, they're going to be looking at the shiny new pieces of that LSU quarterback room, and understandably so. You've got Sam Leavitt. You've got Husan Longstreet, who comes in as this former 5-star from USC who spent 1 year there. But do not sleep on Landon Clark, okay? As a redshirt freshman this past year at the FCS level, he was electric. Nearly 3,000 total yards, nearly 30 touchdowns as a first-year starter who has an absolute cannon, who can make things happen with his legs. Takes a lot of sacks, takes too many sacks. That's why we're not comparing him to Trinidad Chambliss, who does not take those sacks. Needs to improve his accuracy, obviously. By no means a guy that is instantly expected to become a star or anything like that. I'm not saying he's going to be a day one starter and beat out Sam Leavitt or do that, but this is the exact kind of diamond in the rough that Lane Kiffin loves. He's going to come into some of these games, I bet, as a backup when LSU is up big, and people are going to be like, Landon Clark, kind of want to see some more of that because he is fun. Keep in mind, Sam Leavitt is coming off of that foot issue with the Liz Frank surgery. And that is going to be something that's going to limit him throughout the spring. I don't know if he's going to get any of these spring reps, okay? And if he's out of all football activities through the spring, it could be the type of thing that even if he comes back saying, oh, I'm fully healthy going into, summer workouts and all that stuff, it's the type of injury that ended, I don't want to say ended, but it really derailed the end of Cam Newton's career. And of all the hits that he took, that was the thing that was kind of his undoing late with the Panthers and then obviously with the Patriots. So just keep Landon Clark in mind because Trinidad took us all by surprise. And he's not Trinidad 2.0. He's not that. But you have the coach who at least allowed for that to happen. And I think he was brought in for a reason. I really do. Like, I don't think that was a mistake. He was the first one of these guys to sign with LSU. It was like, oh, hey, finally get a quarterback from the portal, and it's an FCS guy. But with Kiffin, you always just kind of have to keep that in the back of your mind. Different stage of his career, but buy low on some Landon Clark.
Hello, I am a time traveler. I'm Will Ogren from 20 minutes ago. I just made the correct point at the wrong time. I'm going to save us some time here, and I will just, because if you want to hear my take on this, go back 20 minutes. But
watch
I will
highlights.
Watch his highlights. And my buddy Peyton, as LSU fan, a little bit of a troll, he texted me, did we just get Diego Pavia as our QB3?
Look, I didn't want to go there. I'm not going to go there yet. It's unfair. Like, Diego Pavia is rarefied air, but
vibes-wise, he thinks he can win this job. And having three guys like that, like I said previously, really big deal.
Very, very interesting. All right, most noteworthy philosophical shift, something we hinted at earlier. Mizzou replacing Bo Pribula with Austin Simmons. Eli Drinkowitz basically said, it'd be great, forward passes. Those seem cool. Didn't get a whole lot of those last year. Bo Pribula is off to Virginia. Simmons is in at Mizzou after coming from Ole Miss. Obviously, a guy that we've talked about a lot on the show, but the thinking is get a guy that can stretch the field better so that Ahmad Hardy's not facing all these 8-man boxes. Because if that's his pre-draft season, that's really going to limit your offensive ceiling. It's different kind of than any Drink-era quarterback. He really is. And not just because he's a lefty, but I don't think he's going to run nearly as often as Brady Cook did. Obviously, not a threat with his legs in the way that Bo Pribula was, but this is someone who was brought in to sling it. And you talk about the Chip Lindsey edition, and him replacing Kirby Moore is interesting. He's a guy that's a little bit polarizing. Michigan fans didn't exactly roll out the red carpet for him. They weren't exactly disappointed to see him leave. But what was kind of overlooked was that Drink brought in Garrett Riley after Dabo Swinney fired him and replaced him with Chad Morris. Garrett Riley won the Broyles Award 3 years ago and did awesome things with Max Duggan. And look, Cade Klubnik this past season did not develop in the way that they hoped, but still did some really good things as a starter at Clemson. And I don't think that all of a sudden it's a philosophical change from what Mizzou has been. They're still going to be a run-first team. Like, they're not going to start throwing the ball 40 times a game, but I love that Drink made the decision to be direct with this. And instead of going with another guy who's kind of like Pribula, who's more established with his legs than he is with his arm, he just said, you know what? I need a guy that can stretch the field, and I need more balance on offense. You have a chance, albeit with some risk because of the turnover issues with Simmons, but you have a chance to be able to get that.
I'm imagining kind of like a hostage video, and you have Drink, and he's on camera, and he's like, "We're gonna do a philosophical change off camera." As Ahmad Hardy, ice bag still on his knees from the bowl game, like, "Put a change. You put a good quarterback who could throw the ball." So I think that again, still a grounded pound offense. To your point about Michigan, maybe their fans would say they should have slung it, past tense, in a different way. But I think what they were able to do was create a really impactful run game. And I think that if you're Mizzou, you do not need to reinvent the wheel. I talked about this a while back, that they have a lot of guys really coming back in terms of their production. They've obviously lost a couple of key guys, but in terms, they had a very young team, kind of went underrated last year. Even, Prebulo was a very football young guy. And so that being said, I do think this has set the stage to be a good Mizzou team. Now, again, schedule-wise, it's not going to be as easy as the last 2 years. I don't know if we will see one that easy, but that being said, I think it's going to be a kind of the inverse of the Mizzou teams that we've seen, where they're like underrated versus overrated because they have some talent. And I think now they have a guy who can maximize that talent for right now.
Yeah. Need some reinforcements on the offensive line. Have lost a lot of talent on that unit the last couple of years too. And that's going to be a key question mark. But, philosophically speaking, I think that you're now looking at Mizzou in a different sort of way and not feeling like they're as predictable offensively. I'm intrigued by this next chapter of Austin Simmons. Okay, most likely to still be here in the year 2035. This is the last one we'll hit on. TJ Finley. My God, Will. The newest quarterback at Incarnate Word, the FCS power that once produced a certain Zach Calzada, also produced Cam Ward. But I figured we could include him, considering that TJ Finley is played at multiple SEC schools. Will, can you name all 7 TJ Finley schools? This is his 7th school.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so LSU.
I named 6, by the way. I named
LSU,
6.
Auburn, Georgia State, Texas State, Incarnate Word. What's the was he at like North Texas or what was the other one?
Oh, that's a good guess. Western Kentucky. And the one that I forgot he was at Tulane.
He sure was, huh?
Yeah. Huh. Weird. Guess his age and then guess his career passing yards.
I'm going to say he is 24 and he has, oh gosh, I don't know his games played. I don't know how many games he started. I'm going to say like 10K.
That 10K would be incredible. Not quite 10K, 7,372 career passing yards. Maybe he's going to hit 10K this season for all I know. Although that would be FCS. So I don't know if we'd count that, but nonetheless, he's 23. He will be 24 by the start of next season. Better question. How many kids does TJ Finley have?
I'm going to guess it's a big number if you're asking me. Let's say 4.
He's got 3. TJ Finley's got 3 kids. A great interview that he did with my guy Van Lathan on Ringer Tailgate, wherein Van was just as blunt as you could possibly get to TJ Finley. He's kind of like the perfect person to interview TJ Finley. And he's like, look, man, I'm getting offered 6 figures to go play football. Why wouldn't I do that? I'd be crazy to stop playing. And then I went back and I'm like, how does he still have eligibility, man? The 4-game threshold, which is now apparently being changed, or at least coaches want to change it to a 9-game threshold, which is crazy.
And then they're going to be at the podium next year. Well, we got men playing college football and this is wrong.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Oh, that's because you had a 9-game red shirt and a guy that had a flu was able to get a red shirt.
You're like an all-conference guy who got a red shirt at some point. Yeah.
Didn't use any eligibility. Why do they keep doing these things? Anyway, Transfer Portal Superlatives. I realize this is like 2 pods in one. People deserve it. We're only doing 1 pod this week, so I figured, you know what? That's perfectly fine. I know we hit on a lot of different things there. Anything else that you wanted to discuss here, Will?
Just a quick thing on Texas, because I knew you'd hit on them earlier. That got scary for Texas fans for a second when you get this mass exodus specifically out of the running back room. It was like, hey, are these checks bouncing? What's going on? Turns into some really big additions there on Seaton, the number 1 player, still available. I don't know why I'm even saying that because he's going to be decided by the time we listen to this pod. But that being said,
the Colorado tackle who everybody looked at and was like, he could start anyway. Kind of what Cam Coleman was at the receiver position. That's like considered. It's Jordan Seaton from Colorado, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I will say too, though, kind of tying all these things together, CJ Baxter, rated as a 3-star transfer in Kentucky. CJ Baxter is not ever a 3-star transfer. He's either a 0-star useless player or he is a 4-star because he's so massive that either he can get that moving in the way that we
227.
Yeah, he's 6'1", he's huge. He's You can't be mid at that size. You either get the rock and you are effective or you are useless. So be looking for that because, you picked him to lead the conference in rushing before an injury. So kind of incomplete, not a wrong take. But if he just pops off and he's the next great Kentucky running back, that wouldn't shock me at all.
It's the only thing I'm worried about. The only thing I'm worried about if he's got lingering health issues because he just didn't quite get that clean bill of health this past season that I was hoping he would, man. Because gosh, when he was out there as a true freshman at Texas, like Texas fans were so excited about his future. And obviously when a 5-star sneezes the right way and you're like, sign me up for more of that guy, I'm buying stock now. But I think he could be really intriguing, especially if that offensive line is as good as expected to be. And Seth McGowan had a really good season this past year, albeit in a different scheme for Kentucky. They lost. It was Dante Dowdell, who is now going to step in as this like Josh McCray role for Georgia as kind of their 4th and 1 short yardage whenever Cass Jones doesn't get the football guy in the Georgia offense.
Yeah. Jungus.
He's borderline. But yeah, so that's going to be really interesting. I will not sell my CJ Baxter stock. I am though worried that he's banged up. I hope to see explosive CJ Baxter. That'd be fun.
Same.
All right, let's kick it to Bear Fallica. Great to catch up with him, be able to provide some more context on this Miami run. I don't know that there are a whole lot of places that are bringing you a Miami grad and an Indiana grad talking on a podcast, talking ball this week. So happy to be able to do that. Here is Bear Fallica. For those of you who are not watching Saturday Down South podcast on YouTube and just are audio only, now would be a good time to go on YouTube and subscribe to Saturday Down South because we have all of our episodes are uploaded in full. If you like watching our individual game breakdowns, you're like, hey, you know what? 2-hour pod, that's really not for me. I really just kind of want to hear about my own team. That's fine. Saturday Down South on YouTube. We're going to have all of those matchup breakdowns. We do every single power conference game. We preview, we recap that involve the SEC. So we have so much content right now on Saturday Down South on YouTube. We have YouTube exclusive videos, and sometimes we'll do interviews that are just on Saturday Down South on YouTube. So definitely go subscribe. Please do that right now. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Chris Bear Fallica. Chris, I want to start with just the Paul Rudd meme. Hey, look at us. A Miami grad, an Indiana grad. We're just chatting about our schools playing in a national championship. Like, just go back and tell yourself that as you're feeling like you're probably yelling into a void in mid-November about college football playoff rankings. Like, just this is cool, man. How awesome is this?
It's great. It's great because it's been like the tale of a couple of different seasons. Like, you think back to the beginning of the year with the start that Miami had, and like, oh, who's the best team in the country? Miami or Ohio State, and then they had the couple of game lull, and then they got hot late. But yeah, not even just mid-November, like the first week of December leading up to the Big Ten championship game, where Indiana was in the game and they're a dog to Ohio State, and Miami was still on the outside looking in. It's been pretty cool. Either way, whatever happens on Monday night, we're going to get a great story and a great finish to the season. Either it's going to be Indiana, this team with losing his team in history when Curt Cignetti took over, winning a national title with the roster that they have in the transfer portal era, or it's going to be Mario Cristobal leading his alma mater back to the promised land after a 25-year hiatus or so. So whatever happens Monday night, it's going to be a great story.
You hate the spread. FanDuel has IU as 8.5-point favorites as of this recording on, we're doing this at 11 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Tell us why you're not a fan of the way that this line has moved from initially opening at Indiana minus 5.5.
It's crazy. Like, it's gotten away too much. And look, I understand the public's fascination with how great Indiana has looked against Oregon and how great they looked against Alabama and what they have done. And they beat Ohio State. They beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. But we're just forgetting about Miami, it looks like here. Like, Miami, if you look at SP Plus, Miami's already got 4 wins. They beat number 2, number 3, number 6, I believe, and number 10. Yeah, they beat Ohio State by double digits in probably, I would say, more convincing fashion than Indiana did. Miami went to A&M and won. Miami showed that they could win a higher scoring game by beating Ole Miss in the semifinal. And I look, as great as Indiana has been, I think there still needs to be. You got to remember the entirety of the season. I think this is where the recency bias of the line has come in. You still have to remember this was a team that was caught in a tie game with Iowa before a late pass. This was a team that was down to Penn State and looked done before they came back and won. And this was a game that scored 13 points against Ohio State. Yes, they won. But look, could Indiana just continue this role and beat up on Miami? Sure, they could. But I think the line is just way, way out of whack here.
I almost think anybody would be in this spot, though, because think about this too. You talk about, the way that Miami took control of that game against Ohio State. If you look at the mutual opponent thing, you could kind of make the counterpoint of, well, if mutual opponents matter, then Indiana only beating Wisconsin by 24 as opposed to Alabama dominating Wisconsin, right, then that would matter. And that was the last time that IU didn't cover a spread, was that game against Wisconsin, in which they only won by 24. But if Georgia had been the team that had beaten the likes of Ohio State and Alabama and Oregon by a combined score of 107-35, I think we'd still be talking about a spread of double digits probably going into this game against Miami, and not having anything to do with Miami, just knowing, oh my God, this is a buzzsaw and it feels like a buzzsaw. So that's the only counterpoint that I would give of like, I think it's more just about the IU side than the Miami side.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. I agree. It is about this story and this magic carpet ride and this dominant run that IU's been on, certainly in the two conference championship games. But I will, if we just want to sit here and play devil's advocate with the results of those games, and I'm not saying I believe this. This is just you and I talking, just a couple of friends, just taking a bunch of different angles and discussing this game. I think if you are of the side of, okay, well, let's just throw this out there. Like Alabama, I think was the biggest, one of the biggest hot button teams, if not the biggest one in the playoff. Like, I think there are a lot of people that felt that Alabama should not have been in the playoff, certainly with the way they played the last month, 5 weeks of the season. And you were looking at a team that couldn't run the ball all year long. You were looking at a team that had trouble on the offensive line all year long. You were looking at a team that couldn't get after the quarterback all year long, and you could kind of see that result coming in the Rose Bowl. And then you fast forward to the semifinal. You've got an Oregon team with both coordinators on the way out and reportedly spending a good bit of time at their new schools. You had an Oregon team that was playing converted linebacker at running back and completely devoid in the backfield. So, like, you could see reasons for people, if they wanted to throw some skepticism out there, maybe put a couple of holes in the resume, you could try and present that. Like I said, I'm not saying I believe that one way or the other, but I think if you're trying to say, why are we just lauding and piling on and just making this complete one-way action on Indiana in the title game, it's probably a good way to start.
And the funny thing is, too, Miami going into this game as a double-digit seed now just looks comical, because you're like, well, that hasn't mattered in a long time. Just like throw that away.
Like if Miami, the double-digit seed, and this is one of the bigger issue. I mean, there are a bunch of issues with the playoff. You can talk about how many teams should be in it, who gets a bye, should the second round be on home field. The biggest issue is with the seeding and the fact that you've got Miami, who is power rated like 5 or 6, I think, by like Sagarin, SP Plus, FPI. Like, that's where they were on selection day. And they're the 10s. Like, they were power rated higher than, power rated higher than Oklahoma, Alabama, and all those teams. And it was just a kind of this nebulous way that the committee goes about seeding teams. So it says 10 seed next to them. But in reality, like, if you're looking at just straight power ratings, this is the team that's better than that. So again, that's why it just doesn't add up to me in terms of where this number is.
I've loved that Mario Cristobal, he said to multiple people, I mean, someone like Kevin Clark, fellow Miami grad, and, Josh Pate, he's talked about this too. he does not want to say the U is back. He hates that. And I think that's such a positive for him and his vision of the program, because it's such a layup nostalgia play. He's got Michael Irvin right behind him, slamming belts and whatnot. He's got Ray Lewis, at the coin toss, all these different things. And instead of doing that publicly, he's taking a more sensible approach to this, knowing that it's a different sport than it was back when Miami was Miami. As a 90s era Miami grad, what's your take on all of that?
I love it because I think it shows that he represents and knows what Miami has been and now what Miami is and can become in this new era of college football. Like if you're looking back, a lot of times you're not looking forward and you're not looking to evolve and be the best that you can in this day. But at the same time, he knows how to reach back for the nostalgia and with the former players that he played with and the greats of the 2000 era teams, which were some of the best in college football history. But I love it. And Mario took a lot of grief and still does for people who talk about his game management skills and things that happened 3 years ago, and even before that. But as a Miami alum and Miami fan, obviously, someone who is familiar with a lot of things down there, like me and my bunch of buddies on the Miami chat that we're involved in, we said from the get-go, like, if it wasn't going to be Mario who led Miami back to this point, like if he couldn't get it done, then who the hell was going to be able to get it done? It's a lot like what people were talking about with Scott Frost in Nebraska and other things. Like, if it's not him, then who? And I think that's proven to be pretty accurate in Nebraska. And the fact that Mario has gotten the local recruiting ties and kind of locking in South Florida again, he understands the unique atmosphere and area that is there. And win or lose Monday night, I think all of us Miami alums can kind of take pride knowing that he did get it going again, and the arrow, the trajectory is up. Like I said, whether they win Monday night or whether they lose Monday night.
Okay, this is something that I'm very curious about, because I think there could be different answers to this depending on when this question's asked. But on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being Joe Burrow and a 1 being, let's just say, I don't know, Tate Martell.
Good one.
How confident are you when Carson Beck drops back to pass?
I'd say late season Carson Beck for sure. I'd say 7, 8.
Okay,
I am. We're talking like mid-season. We're getting towards the Jaron Williams, the Tate Martell kind of era as well. But he's been great in the postseason. He had a couple of early throws in the game against Ole Miss that brought a little bit of question. But when they have needed a drive, certainly in the postseason, and the games he played late in the year that they had to win, like at Pitt, he was unbelievable in a game that they needed to go out and put a big number and kind of impress the committee. But the throws he made to Keelan Marion last week, the throws he was making to Malachi Toney, like, he played a fantastic game. And everyone talked about however much he's making, and who even knows what the reported figures are, if they're even close to being accurate. I don't think they are. But he has been a lightning rod all year long. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? Hell yeah, it was worth it. Like, if they win Monday night, he's not going to go down as an all-time Miami great, but he's going to go down as one of the legends of Miami football, to be the quarterback to bring Miami, give them their 6th national title in their first in 20-something years. But I think one of the reasons why I have more confidence now in Carson Beck is because I think he is, I don't want to say accepted, but I think he's understood a little bit more as the year goes on. He doesn't need to be the guy to carry this team on his shoulders and throw the ball downfield with these 15, 20-yard air throws to create big plays. He's got a running game and an offensive line that he can lean on. He knows the offensive line is going to give him a pocket. And if he can just sit back there and have time to maybe take the shorter throw or use his leg. I know Shannon Dawson has been begging him to use his legs more throughout the year. And obviously he had a couple of monster scrambles, not only in the Ole Miss game, but in the Ohio State as well. So if that is an added dimension now, that he feels comfortable using his legs and running at times, that just makes me feel even better about him and his ability, and the fact that he is seeing the field better and he is so much more comfortable and in tune with what's going on.
I kind of think the only difference between late season Carson Beck and Ken Dorsey is their choice of sleeves. Carson Beck opted for the tattoo sleeve, and Ken Dorsey opted for the big white baggy sleeves. Other than that, though, you kind of look at their surroundings, the way that they're used in the offense. Fair comp or no?
It's so funny you said that, because, by the way, it's so funny whenever I say that. Like, if my wife were here, like right now, either in the other room or and she was listening to us record this, she has noticed that is kind of a verbal crutch of mine. Like, if I am abused by something, I will always start the sentence or the answer with, "It's so funny," and I'll get the text like, "It's so funny. What's it?" And she'll just bust my chops. But you're right. I was thinking about the first time I really saw Ken Dorsey play at Lane Stadium at Virginia Tech in 1999. And I can remember it being as a cool windy night in these baggy white sleeve, like long sleeve, like who knows if it was a mock turtleneck or whatever the hell, layering on underneath. But yeah, 140 pounds, soaking wet, long sleeve, not even filling out the shirt, and great call.
Look, if you want to take that to your Miami group text, feel free. It's there for the taking. Just look a little bit different. You're the gambling guy. Have you already gotten Mark Fletcher at plus 750 for the first TD of the game?
No, I have not. I don't know if I would want to do that, because I mean we've seen Charlie Brown get some carries in here, and I wonder if Pringle might get a carry or two here as well. We've seen obviously now Beck running. The one running prop that I did play was FanDuel had a 107.5 rushing total for Miami, and I did play the over there on that. And I think we've seen Miami's running game get going, but I think it's going to be especially important here. Look, Brian Haynes and the Indiana coaching staff, clearly they know what Miami's going to try and do, especially half one with Xavier Lucas being suspended. Miami's going to try and control the ball first half even more so than normal, just because they're going to want to keep Indiana's offense off the field while the Canes are shorthanded in the secondary. But how great, if you haven't had the opportunity to really get to know Mark Fletcher or hear him talk or see him, I'm going to promote my old colleague and my friend Kirk Herbstreit and Joey Galloway, that their show that they do every Monday. Go back and watch that. They had a great little spot with Mark Fletcher, and it really gives you insight into him as a person, and him and his mom driving all over the place, and the role that she has had since his dad passed away. I got an opportunity. I was down prior to my vacation. We left out of Miami, go over to practice and meet him and meet Keontae Scott, CJ Daniels. Like, look, you can not be a Miami fan. You can say whatever and have your opinions of whatever. But if you get to meet these guys, like calling them thugs or whatever, look, the reputation of Miami in the past, whatever it is, but these kids, like grade A type kids. But Fletcher has been awesome. I would expect to see. What the crazy thing was, supposedly he was sick for a couple of Miami players. I hadn't heard anything about that until the night of, but I guess there were a couple of guys under the weather, and even remember late in the Ohio State game, he came out late, and it was Brown who came in for the final couple of drives. So probably was something to that, but he's fantastic, and obviously in the first half he's going to have give me an anytime touchdown with Mark Fletcher. How about that?
That's the better play overall, because you got to be able to finish drives against Indiana. You can't settle for field goals. And for those that criticize Shannon Dawson for getting away from Mark Fletcher in some of these key moments, hey, if he's sick, can't give him 40 carries in a game like that.
I will say this though, and I am friendly. I'm friends with Shannon, and we have a great relationship. I was sitting there in the press box with the flea flicker and some other thing, the Malik hat, running the ball down the field. You bring in the Malik hat, and they come up short on third down, and then the flea flicker and the intentional grounding costing them points. I was just sitting there like, what are we doing? But in the end, it all worked out, and all is well.
Those bubble screens though to Malachi Tony are automatic touchdown. It feels like, or at least they were against Ole Miss. Against Indiana, that might be a different story.
Right. It might. And how about the catch on the sideline where he got the toe down, but it wasn't really
not the heel.
Are you kidding me? I'm sitting there. I'm like, did he catch that? And I'm like, I think he did. And then you see the replay, and it's like, I think they're going to overturn this. But he is an incredible player. And shoot, now here's how we're already thinking as Miami fans now. Like with everything that's been going on in the portal, he's been a high school court. Like is where we are now. Are we going to be seeing Malachi Tony maybe under center next year for a few plays a game, even more than we are now with kind of the quarterback situation? Could be an interesting dynamic next year if you are looking for a Heisman type bet next year, knowing that maybe Malachi Tony is going to be getting 10 to 15 plays in a Wildcat type situation under center. It might be someone you might want to look at give a little second peek to making a Heisman wager once those odds get posted.
And that is the silver lining for both teams. I mean, the arrow is pointing up. I mean, Miami returning maybe two of the best skill players in college football next year, with Fletcher already announcing he's coming back, Malachi Tony coming back. Certainly, this doesn't have to be a one-year wonder at all. But
no.
Give me your path for the Miami victory, because we talk about those two guys, and we can talk about Carson Beck not making mistakes, but give me the path for a Miami victory, because it kind of feels like each of these playoff games for Miami has followed a different script.
I think it's along the lines of what we saw against Ohio State. It is pressure, the quarterback, and I know there have been some concerns. One of the things that Jeff Schwartz brought up, who obviously got a first up close and personal look as to what Indiana is capable of on both sides of the ball last week. He said that the Indiana right tackle could struggle against Bain and Messidor. So I think obviously that was something that we talked about before the Ohio State game, how there were holes potentially in that Ohio State offensive line, and that could potentially be exposed. If Mendoza holds the ball for over 3 seconds or so, which has kind of been his MO, is the pocket going to collapse that much quicker? So I think it's kind of along the lines of what we saw against Ohio State, running the ball, how well Miami can do that. They did just enough against Ohio State. They had a good bit of success against Ole Miss and ultimately wore them down. I think we have seen at times this year, whether it's been Penn State, even the game last week, the first couple drives of the game before Oregon decided to just keep giving Indiana the ball deep in their own territory. I think we saw the Oregon running game have a little bit of success, even with the backups that were in. So I think they're going to stay true to that. I think they're going to rely on their defense and try and just hang in there for the first half until Lucas comes back, because that is the biggest question I have for Miami in terms of a path to victory, is the defensive side of the ball. Corey Heatherman in the front has been great, but they're a little beat up back there with Frederic being injured. Jacoby Thomas nicked up his shoulder. I don't know if it was a stinger or whatever, but I think he's going to be okay. Lucas not being in there. Damari Brown, I don't know if he's going to be back at all. He's been dealing with the turf toe for a while. How Miami can defend now the 3 wide receivers that IU has since the emergence of Becker, that is the biggest concern I have as a Miami guy, worrying about how they're ultimately going to slow down and cover all those guys.
Yeah, an interesting wrinkle too with Heatherman being the former James Madison defensive coordinator under Signetti. Like, of course, there's just the way that these teams have just kind of overlapped, and with Mendoza's dad, playing with Mario Cristobal in high school, like all this stuff. It's just kind of bizarre the way that this is all lined up. What do you expect the crowd split to be? Do you think Miami fans will have IU fans outnumbered?
It's going to be pretty close. I think one of the advantages Miami had was getting there like a day early. Like their game was a day before the Indiana game, and whatever Orange Bowl, or not Orange Bowl, but CFP tickets that were for sale, they could scoop up. I also think Miami might have a little bit of an advantage because of the corporate sponsor tickets and the business area tickets. I think are going to be a lot of, now it's going to be Miami fans who are going to be eating those up, Miami employees of whatever hospitality, or those tickets are going to go to Miami-based people. So I think there'll be a rooting. I don't think it's going to be a significant deal one way or another inside the stadium. Now, I will say this. I think you're probably going to see about 250,000 Indiana fans down there in South Florida this weekend and Monday, just to be there for the event, and they're going to do whatever they can to try and get into the stadium. And I know people who I went to school with, Miami fans, who have had club level seats for 15, 20 years, and they got shut out of tickets. So the tickets are non-existent, and I think that's why they're going for so much. But I don't think it's going to be a big advantage. It's certainly not going to be what it was at Mercedes-Benz last week, and it's certainly not going to be what it was back in like the 80s and 90s when Miami would play in the Orange Bowl against Oklahoma or Nebraska, and you'd see that like Oklahoma or Nebraska like corner on the visiting sideline of their fans, and everything else was Miami. It's not going to be like that.
Do you have a score prediction?
Yeah, let's go 31-27 Miami. How about that? I think wasn't that the score of the Ole Miss game? I think it might have been.
Yeah, because it was up 20. Yeah,
it was 27. Yeah. Let's roll it back.
Love it. One last thing for you. You're tight with Corso, former IU coach. Do you know if he's going to be making the trip?
He's not. I called him last week. I called him Friday, the day of the IU Oregon game, and I called him and I got his voicemail, and I called him from the airport in Phoenix, and I just said, hey, I'm sitting here. Great game last night. Went to the game, hoping to be Miami, Indiana in the championship game and get a chance to see you. Rooting for him tonight. I know you're going to be watching, and good luck. And I got off the plane, and he had called and he called me back just saying, you said you're on the plane. Yeah, it goes rooting for IU tonight. Love Mendoza. Hope they can win. And I think I'm going to be sitting here at home watching the game, but hopefully I can see you at some point in the future. But yeah, I don't think he's going to be making it down.
Okay, I live 15 minutes from him. I'm driving down. I can pick him up and drive him down. I would drive down Lee Corso to see IU in the national championship.
I might have to give him that offer. I might have to call him back and just say, hey, my buddy Connor, he can pick you up and swing by on the way. I got a ride to and from.
I'm just saying. I drive down Monday. We're doing a 1 day, just a 1 day trip, driving back on Tuesday. I would love the company, just throwing it out there. Make it happen.
You might enjoy that. You'd have to stop for a couple of treats along the way, a couple of Diet Cokes and bag of chips and some sweets along the way, just to keep going. I'm going to call him when we're done recording.
Just saying, just throwing it out there. Chris, really appreciate it, man. Best of luck to Miami, and I'll see you down there.
Best of luck to you. Yeah, I'll get down there Sunday afternoon, and we'll certainly see you in the press box, I'm sure, on Monday night.
Awesome. All right, well, let's close with some Lad of the Week. Want me to go first?
Yes, sir.
All Homer Pod. Beefy Homer Pod. Caleb Williams. That moment in which he hits the throw to Rome Odunze, friend of the show, wherein he doesn't have a foot on the ground, I think that's the best Bears throw of my lifetime. Now, if they lose that game, I'm not going to remember it. But then not only did the Bears end up winning, of course, and pulling off this historic comeback against the Packers team that, just unfortunately just faded down the stretch. But then he just has turned into the perfect type of Packers troll by wearing the cheese grater hat and doing the cheese grating live on the desk. Will, I have waited my entire life for someone to lean into this in that sort of way. And while I do think that if I had been alive to see Jim McMahon as the quarterback of the Bears, for a period of time, instead of watching the Packers complete the dirtiest hit in NFL history and essentially end his career, and I wasn't able to see him later on, not that I'm bitter about that, but he has just been everything that I've hoped for. And I love the fact that he has haters, and there are people that watch Caleb Williams and they don't like him because he paints his nails, and they think that he is just this new generation of quarterback and he's not, this, that, or the other. And I love it all because he has been so unbelievably clutch. And the thing that I wondered about him is he going to be a stat compiler? Is he going to be this guy that's clutch in big time moments? Because that's not necessarily who he was as a college quarterback. I don't think there are a lot of instances. The Kansas game, ironically enough, when he was at Oklahoma, stands out. There weren't a lot of those instances in which you felt like, oh man, Caleb Williams, fourth quarter comeback, unbelievable, incredible. And he has just built this entire Bears mantra of being able to just be the never say die team. And it's incredible. It is so satisfying to watch. I don't know what his future holds, but my God, watching that comeback and the throws that he made down the stretch after he was terrible for the first 3 quarters. I'll tell you what, love me some Caleb Williams. I'm so all in right now. And football's fun.
I mean, again, just the most improbable 1% reality where Caleb Williams is, I believe, like for qualified starters, the lowest completion percentage for a starting quarterback in the NFL over the course of the regular season. And then he goes into the playoff and just rips the throat out of the Packers in the fourth quarter. The exact opposite of the player that you were fearing he would be. As a guy who, sitting there pretty kind of Jared Goff.
Pouting, bad body language, all that.
And it's like, okay, you would expect him to be, okay, in this Ben Johnson system, 72% completion, get to the playoff and just choke. And, now that I am nearing, I don't have any kids or anything, no plans, I'm nearing kind of that, let me give you some advice, son, unk age, right? I would call it unk age. Here's a great way to ingratiate yourself with fans, okay? It's really hard to nail the, I'm going to show up and be part of somewhere I've never been. Here's what you need to do. Hate their rivals. Just hate their rivals. If you show up and you're a franchise, if you're a young quarterback, if you're a transfer player, you don't have to be like, I love, all this stuff in Chicago. I love the Bulls. I love all this different stuff. Don't do that and don't expect that because fan bases will rip you apart for being disingenuous. You'll come off sounding like Brian Kelly. Here's some career advice. Just being like, I've hated the people that you hate since I was born. Because that's not a lie.
When Ben Johnson said F the Packers, the hairs on my arms stood up. And I got excited in a way that I don't know that I've ever truly been as a sports fan. Like just pure excitement of, oh my God, he hates them as much as I do. This is so satisfying. I watched the 10-minute clip. I can't remember who was that tweeted this originally, but like the 10-minute clip of these Packers streamers as they're watching this Packers collapse and all of this happen. And I'm just ear to ear smiling. And I apologize if there are any Packers fans / owners who are listening to this right now. You've had a rough week. But my God, when your coach and your quarterback hate the rival, it is so satisfying. And it's probably not discussed a lot in sports. And I used to just have to sit there and listen to Aaron Rodgers tell my team that he owned them. And there was nothing that my team could say or do about it because he was right.
I didn't even think about that element of this. Is you also got to watch Aaron Rodgers just farting everywhere.
Ain't no fun when the rabbit's got the gun, Will. Actually, it is fun.
Pretty
so
fun.
Much fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, life is good.
So I told you off air that, we might have made history here and have a contested lad of the week. Okay. Might have one that you vehemently disagreed with. So I'm going to kind of move the goalpost here and I'm going to make my lad of the week, Liam Cohen. Your lost cousin.
Look, I have not busted out Liam Cohen as lad of the week in a long while. And I was going to, if the Jags had won that playoff game, I was going to name Liam Cohen my lad of the week, but I did not. So interested to hear you go in this direction.
Of course. And you've seen kind of where I'm going here, like I said, because, you have the receiver, Lynn Jones, who is, kind of a Jacksonville staple, been around. And so the Jags have this great turnaround season, setting NFL history for most game improvement. Obviously the caveat of kind of longer season, but still just a historic documentary where the turnaround, they lose a really close, playoff game or they don't get it done. But that being said, at the very end of the press availability for that season. So this press availability, from what I understand, very short, not a lot of very hard hitting questions asked in that.
Everybody's seen what you're about to say. So just everybody kind of knows what you're talking about here.
Yes, well, I do want to add that caveat though, because it wasn't like it was this big thing where like people were like, ooh, me, and she took someone's spot, but she goes in and tells Liam Cohen like, hey, keep your head up, keep your nose to the grindstone. You did really good this year. The city of Jacksonville loves you. Basically just saying, we're really proud of you. And there has just been an explosion from every verified person on Twitter that is a journalist giving takes on this. Now, one weird thing that we have in common is we've both been beat reporters. I did it for SB Nation. You did it for longer than me, took it a lot more seriously than me. I've always been kind of a journeyman part-timer. So I want to get your take on that. What do you think about that question I was asked Liam Cohen?
If you've ever been in, people that haven't been in that setting don't get why people in that setting would think that's weird. If you've been in that setting, you kind of know that's just not really the place that you're supposed to approach this of like, hey, let me get you this pat on the back. It's just not something that's typically said in a press conference. And if it had been said where you're kind of off meeting to the side or something like that, and Liam's about to like go back to the locker room or something like that, and you like go up to him or something, that would probably be treated differently. And so a lot of big J's were upset and thinking this is totally unprofessional, and it's not something I would ever do. It's not something that the way that I've been taught to think like this. And I'm not saying that those rules are clearly outlined. Those lines have been really, really blurred. I do think the outrage that came from journalists is a bit much. It's definitely a bit much of like taking yourself a little bit too seriously. And it's like, all right, oh well. Some of these moments just kind of happen, and it depends on what makes the rounds. I think the way that Liam handled it, and he wasn't weirded out by it by any stretch of the imagination, and took it all in stride because Liam's a good dude. But I do think that the outrage kind of sparked then that pushback. And then you have the people like McAfee saying like, oh, like so many of these journalists, they just hate sports. It's not that they hate sports. It's that if you're trained to cover a team, talk about a team, you're trained to present an objective viewpoint. And we can get in all these different things about ethics, and that's what all this has gotten into. But what this has reminded us is that there is still that divide. These lines in media have been blurred. And when you see people like Dave Portnoy who act the way that they do, it is totally different than longtime beat reporter who's at a press conference who, look, very oftentimes I find that a lot of media members in press conferences ask dumb questions. What'd you think about that 3rd and 7 decision at the start of the third quarter when blah, blah, blah? Dude, everybody saw the game. Why? That quote's not getting you anything. These press conferences usually aren't for people. Like they're usually so irrelevant, and they only get attention when a moment like this happens that makes people feel something. They're usually nothing burgers, wherein a lot of media members are there, and I've been in these situations so much, they ask nothing questions. And so this sparked a reaction from all different sides, and I kind of disagree with both reactions, as bad as that sounds.
I'm kind of there with you. That's what I was like. I didn't want to have it be the reporter and then have you be like, that was unprofessional. What are you talking about? But I do see both sides of it, which is that if it was a situation where she was boxing somebody out that had like a deep like route tree question that was like, hey, on this third, you did X, Y, and Z. You 33% of the chance you do this. This time you did this.
She did not prevent anybody from doing their job. If that's the takeaway, that's the wrong takeaway.
And that's kind of where I'm going here, especially Jacksonville with a smaller market. I get it. Now, if it's New York media, if it's a packed press room, if it's media days,
she's laughed out of the room.
Laughed out of the room. But like that's the context I would give, because like there were like maybe 1 or 2 questions at media days where we kind of looked at each other like, why did you just ask that question? Like that would just you're on national television, brother.
Different setting.
Yeah. And so I want to kind of bring people into the fold there, right? As we do here, because for us, like for me covering the Magic, there's a lot of losing. There's not a lot of losing. Now it's different to be numbed by losing. A different situation than when you have expectations and you fall short of them. It's a lot more raw. We had a little bit of fun with the Magic in bad seasons because it was like, what are you going to do? You're not going to trade for LeBron, so here we are. But I think it's just kind of worth noting that could have been said off air, could have been said if they truly do run into each other that much. But at the same time, the visceral backlash of like, this is an affront to journalism. I would argue that the true beat reporter, the true news person who, goes to practices and really has their finger on the pulse of the team, those are becoming less and less. And so I think that someone using that moment to be like, okay, well, I have been here all year, or I do represent Jacksonville, and I want to talk to you from that standpoint. I think is pretty cool versus having maybe like a national person come in and just ask like, oh, big third down question. Everybody goes, okay, we're going to run with this question on broadcast.
Yeah. And it gets into a lot of elements. I'm sure a lot of those elements people do not care about. And there is certainly a culture in this day and age of media sucks. We just kind of hate people that act like traditional journalists. And if you are upset with this, then you're part of the problem of thinking that you can't ever be positive in these scenarios. I personally, if Indiana wins the national championship, I'm not going to sit there and just like congratulate Curt Cignetti in a press conference. It's one thing if I were to go up to him, or if like I had a one-on-one or something like that, or when I have coaches on this show, if we talk off air and I'm like, hey, love what you guys have been able to do, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to be my role. Okay. That's just not how I see myself. And it would be outside of my personality. It would be performative to do something like that. And that's, I think, what part of the backlash was, is that some people kind of thought that she was, yes, being a human being, which is not to be shunned, but that was also considered performative because that's so out of the norm of how these situations typically work. Then there was a little bit of this, like, why are you even doing this? Why not doing that? Why not just do that? If you really want to like tell him to keep his head up, just like go off to the side and say that. You don't have to like get a microphone to do it. But nonetheless, it caused a lot of reaction. Everybody's probably a little bit wrong about it.
And my favorite part of this too is that the big journos that came out so hard for it were getting their bad questions or kind of pointless questions compiled. That was really cool. Seeing people go, I would never ask this question. It is like, okay, here's a question about asking the quarterback about his, girlfriend or like whatever it was. Because at the end of the day, it is a back and forth business. And I'll close out on this. Again, I know it's a longer one, but people often say, why do you ask soft questions? If I were in this situation, would go in and go, hey, you failed today.
No, you
stink.
wouldn't.
No,
none of these people would.
You wouldn't. If you hadn't been, there is nothing in the world like standing up and looking a millionaire in the eyes and saying, you're a failure. Because guess what? Those are the clips that go viral, not in a good way for the reporter. The amount of reporters that have gone in there and hung in the pocket against like, a Belichick or against a Pop or something.
Saban.
Saban is because Saban is very... Saban will give you a great answer if you ask a great question, but if you ask a bad question, so same deal there. You're not going to go in and be like, Saban, what about X, Y, and Z? And so just think about it from that perspective is that the image you have of yourself as a journalist, if you really behave that way, you would get fired because your sources would all hate you.
And then you would get probably called out and
on air, which I've been. Have you been done where you ask a question that like the coach just didn't like for whatever reason and they just take a moment to just grandstand about it? Because it's happened to me.
I don't think DeBoer liked at SEC Media Days when I asked him if he felt like he lived up to the Bama standard in year one. I don't think he liked that question.
Yeah. He's polite. I'll give him that.
I've asked Saban a comparison question before on teleconference, and he just hated it instantly and just moved right past it. I mean, I've asked Stoops questions before in which he's kind of bristled at and gone blah, blah, blah. Now, I'd like to think that like when I have people on in a podcast setting, different setting, entirely different setting. We can kind of have fun with coaches. We can kind of be, be playful with some of this stuff. A press conference is a very unique set of circumstances, and full context probably needs to be added to it. But I wasn't offended by it as a journalist, and at the same time, would I have done it? No, just not my role. And that's as even with Liam, who like I could send Liam a text, okay, but I still wouldn't even do that with him in that setting, and that's the guy who might be related to me. So anyway, good season, year one, Liam Cohen. Would have been awesome for a Bears-Jags Super Bowl, buddy.
Oof.
I mean, I've died and gone
you versus you.
I've died and gone to heaven, so I can't get greedy. Shout out to Tate McRae. All right. We will record again next Tuesday after the national championship. Leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at TJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.